Close your eyes and take a slow, gentle breath. Tonight, we travel far beyond recorded history, beyond memory, and beneath the silent surface of the ocean. There, hidden under endless waves and forgotten by time, lies the legend of Atlantis, a civilization so advanced, so brilliant, that it believed itself eternal. This is not just a story of a lost city, but a reflection of human ambition, wisdom, and the fragile balance between power and humility. As the water slowly closes above marble towers and glowing streets, we begin a journey into the rise, the glory, and the quiet fall of Atlantis, a story meant not to awaken fear, but understanding.
The mystery of Atlantis has fascinated human imagination for more than 2,000 years, standing at the crossroads of history, myth, philosophy, and speculation. Atlantis is described as a powerful and advanced civilization that existed long before recorded history, only to vanish suddenly beneath the sea. The earliest and most influential account of Atlantis comes from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who mentioned the lost island in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE. According to Plato, Atlantis was a vast island nation located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, generally believed to be the Strait of Gibraltar. This civilization was said to possess immense wealth, advanced technology, and a complex social structure, surpassing all other societies of its time. Yet, despite its greatness, Atlantis fell into moral corruption, prompting the gods to punish it with a catastrophic destruction that submerged the island in a single day and night of misfortune. Plato's account presents Atlantis not merely as a geographical location, but as a moral allegory. He contrasts the virtuous and disciplined society of ancient Athens with the arrogance and decadence of Atlantis. In this sense, Atlantis serves as a philosophical warning about the dangers of power, greed, and moral decay. However, Plato's detailed descriptions of the island's geography, architecture, and political organization have led many scholars and enthusiasts to wonder whether Atlantis was inspired by a real place or event. Plato described concentric rings of land and water surrounding the capital city, elaborate canals, massive temples, and walls covered in precious metals like gold, silver, and a mysterious substance called orichalcum. These vivid details blur the line between symbolic storytelling and historical reporting. The origins of Plato's knowledge about Atlantis are themselves mysterious. Plato claimed that the story was passed down to him through his ancestor Solon, a famous Athenian lawmaker who allegedly learned it from Egyptian priests during his travels. According to the priests, the story of Atlantis was recorded in ancient Egyptian texts that predated Greek civilization by thousands of years. This claim has fueled speculation that Atlantis might represent a lost chapter of human history preserved in fragments through ancient oral traditions. Egypt, known for its long historical memory and monumental architecture, often plays a central role in theories about Atlantis, as many believe the priests may have been referencing real ancient events, such as massive floods or the collapse of prehistoric cultures. One of the most compelling aspects of the Atlantis legend is its sudden and complete destruction. Plato described a series of violent earthquakes and floods that caused the island to sink beneath the ocean, leaving behind an impassable sea of mud. This imagery resonates with many ancient flood myths found across different cultures, including the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical story of Noah. These parallels have led researchers to suggest that Atlantis might represent a lost chapter of human history, preserved in fragments through ancient oral traditions. Egypt, known for its long historical memory and monumental architecture, often plays a central role in theories about Atlantis, as many believe the priests may have been referencing real ancient events, such as massive floods or the collapse of prehistoric cultures.
Throughout history, Atlantis has been interpreted in countless ways, each reflecting the concerns and knowledge of its time. In the Middle Ages, Atlantis was largely dismissed as a pagan myth, incompatible with Christian theology. However, during the Renaissance, interest in classical texts revived, and scholars began to re-examine Plato's writings with renewed curiosity. The age of exploration further intensified fascination with Atlantis as European explorers encountered unknown lands and cultures, prompting speculation that remnants of Atlantis might exist in the Americas or other distant regions. Some even believed that advanced ancient civilizations, such as the Maya or the Aztecs, were descendants of Atlanteans who survived the catastrophe. In the 19th century, the Atlantis debate took a dramatic turn with the publication of Ignatius Donnelly's book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Donnelly argued that Atlantis was a real, technologically advanced civilization that served as the source of many ancient cultures, including those of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. He suggested that similarities in architecture, mythology, and symbolism across these civilizations could only be explained by a common origin in Atlantis. Although modern scholars largely reject Donnelly's conclusions due to a lack of scientific evidence, his work played a crucial role in popularizing Atlantis and embedding it firmly in modern imagination. Scientific advancements in geology, archaeology, and oceanography have both challenged and enriched the Atlantis narrative. Plate tectonics has shown that continents do not sink suddenly into the ocean, making Plato's account geologically implausible in a literal sense. However, underwater archaeology has revealed submerged settlements and structures in various parts of the world, such as the sunken city of Pavlopetri near Greece and the submerged ruins off the coast of India. These discoveries demonstrate that ancient coastal communities were indeed lost to rising sea levels, lending some credibility to the idea that Atlantis could be based on a real, albeit exaggerated, event. Another prominent theory links Atlantis to the Minoan civilization of ancient Crete. The Minoans were a highly advanced Bronze Age society known for their sophisticated architecture, art, and maritime power. Around 1600 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, triggered earthquakes and tsunamis that devastated Minoan settlements. Some scholars believe that this catastrophe could have inspired Plato's story of Atlantis, especially given the Minoans' dominance of the Aegean Sea and their sudden decline. The circular shape of Santorini's caldera has also been compared to Plato's description of Atlantis's concentric rings. Despite extensive research, no definitive evidence of Atlantis has ever been found, and mainstream historians generally regard it as a fictional or symbolic tale. Yet the enduring appeal of Atlantis lies precisely in its ambiguity. It represents humanity's longing for a lost golden age, a time when civilization was supposedly more advanced, harmonious, and connected to nature. Atlantis also reflects a deep-seated fear of sudden destruction, reminding us that even the most powerful societies are vulnerable to natural forces beyond their control. This dual symbolism of hope and warning continues to resonate across generations. In modern times, Atlantis has transcended academic debate to become a cultural phenomenon. It appears in novels, films, television series, video games, and even conspiracy theories. Some claim that Atlanteans possessed advanced technologies such as crystal energy, flying machines, or even knowledge passed down from extraterrestrial beings. While these ideas lack scientific credibility, they highlight humanity's fascination with hidden knowledge and forgotten wisdom. Atlantis has become a blank canvas upon which people project their dreams, fears, and beliefs about the past and future of civilization. The mystery of Atlantis also raises important questions about how history is remembered and recorded. Much of what we know about ancient civilizations comes from fragmentary evidence, often interpreted through the lens of modern assumptions. Myths and legends, once dismissed as mere fantasy, are increasingly recognized as valuable sources of cultural memory. They may not provide literal historical accounts, but they can preserve emotional truths about human experiences such as migration, disaster, and societal collapse. In this sense, Atlantis may be less about finding a lost city and more about understanding the stories humanity tells itself to make sense of its past. As we stand at a time of rapid technological advancement and environmental uncertainty, the story of Atlantis feels more relevant than ever. Rising sea levels, climate change, and natural disasters threaten modern coastal cities, echoing the ancient warning embedded in Plato's tale. Atlantis serves as a mirror, reflecting both our achievements and our vulnerabilities. Whether it was a real place, a distorted memory, or a philosophical invention, its message remains powerful. Civilizations rise and fall, and moral responsibility must accompany power and progress. Part 1 of The Mystery of Atlantis thus sets the foundation for a deeper exploration into one of history's most enduring enigmas. It invites us to question the boundaries between myth and reality, to examine the evidence with both skepticism and imagination, and to reflect on what the legend reveals about humanity itself. The search for Atlantis continues not only in the depths of the ocean, but also within the human mind, where curiosity.
The search for Atlantis did not end with Plato's writings. Instead, it marked the beginning of centuries of speculation, debate, and exploration. As scholars, explorers, and dreamers revisited Plato's descriptions, they began to ask a fundamental question. If Atlantis truly existed, where could it have been located? Plato's statement that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules has been interpreted in many ways, leading to a wide range of geographical theories. Some believe the pillars refer strictly to the Strait of Gibraltar, placing Atlantis somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, while others argue that ancient geographical knowledge was limited and symbolic, allowing for alternative interpretations that place Atlantis within the Mediterranean itself. One of the most popular theories situates Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores Islands. Supporters of this idea argue that the Azores sit atop a mid-ocean ridge and could represent the peaks of a once larger landmass that sank beneath the sea. The island's volcanic origin and dramatic underwater topography have fueled claims that remnants of ancient structures lie hidden beneath the waves. Over the years, sonar scans and satellite images have been interpreted by enthusiasts as evidence of submerged roads, walls, and even pyramidal formations. However, mainstream scientists maintain that these features are natural geological formations, shaped by volcanic activity and erosion rather than human construction. Another widely discussed location is the Mediterranean island of Santorini, linked to the Minoan civilization. This theory gains strength from the catastrophic eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE, one of the most powerful volcanic events in recorded history. The eruption caused massive earthquakes, tsunamis, and ash clouds that devastated nearby islands and coastal regions. The Minoans, who were among the most advanced maritime cultures of their time, suffered immense losses and never fully recovered. Many scholars believe that memories of this disaster could have been passed down through generations, eventually reaching Plato in a mythologized form. The circular caldera of Santorini, formed after the eruption, bears a striking resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis's concentric rings of land and water. Beyond Europe, some theories place Atlantis in unexpected regions of the world. A number of researchers have suggested that Atlantis could have been located near the Caribbean, particularly around the Bahamas and the so-called Bimini Road. Discovered in 1968, the Bimini Road consists of large, rectangular limestone blocks arranged in a linear formation beneath shallow water. To some, this formation appears to be the remains of an ancient harbor or roadway, possibly built by an advanced civilization. Skeptics argue that the blocks are naturally fractured beach rock, shaped by geological processes over thousands of years.
Despite scientific explanations, the Bimini Road continues to attract attention as one of the most intriguing underwater sites linked to Atlantis. South America has also entered the Atlantis debate, with some proposing that the lost civilization existed near the Andes or the Amazon basin. These theories often point to advanced ancient cultures such as the Inca, as well as mysterious earthworks and submerged structures discovered in river systems. Proponents argue that Plato's reference to Atlantis as a vast empire ruling over many lands could align with the scale of ancient South American civilizations. However, critics note that there is no clear cultural or chronological connection between these societies and Plato's account, making such claims highly speculative. The idea of Atlantis has also been connected to Antarctica, particularly through the controversial theories of Charles Hapgood. Hapgood proposed that Earth's crust could shift suddenly, relocating entire continents. According to this theory, Antarctica may once have been located in a more temperate region, capable of supporting an advanced civilization before being rapidly displaced to the South Pole. While this idea captured the imagination of the public and even received cautious interest from figures like Albert Einstein, modern geology has firmly rejected the concept of rapid crustal displacement. Nevertheless, the Antarctic Atlantis theory remains popular in alternative history circles. As technology advanced, the search for Atlantis entered a new phase. The development of sonar mapping, satellite imagery, and deep-sea submersibles allowed researchers to explore the ocean floor with unprecedented precision. These tools revealed submerged landscapes, ancient shorelines, and sunken settlements that demonstrated how dramatically sea levels have changed since the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, vast areas of land that are now underwater were once habitable. This realization has led some scholars to reconsider Plato's timeline, suggesting that Atlantis might represent a prehistoric coastal civilization lost to rising seas rather than a single monumental island. Underwater archaeology has uncovered compelling evidence of ancient human activity beneath the oceans. Sites such as Pavlopetri in Greece, Dwarka off the coast of India, and Yonaguni near Japan have revealed structures that challenge traditional views of early civilization. While none of these sites match Plato's description of Atlantis exactly, they demonstrate that complex societies existed earlier than once believed, and that their remains can indeed lie hidden beneath the sea. These discoveries blur the boundary between myth and archaeology, keeping the possibility of Atlantis alive in scholarly discussion. Beyond physical evidence, Atlantis has been interpreted as a symbolic representation of lost knowledge. Some philosophers and historians argue that Atlantis was never meant to be found on a map, but rather understood as a metaphor for a forgotten age of wisdom. In this view, Atlantis represents humanity's cyclical rise and fall, where periods of enlightenment are followed by decline and destruction. Plato, as a philosopher, may have used Atlantis as a narrative device to express his ideas about ideal societies, moral decay, and divine justice. In the modern era, Atlantis has become deeply intertwined with esoteric and mystical traditions. Theosophists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries claimed that Atlantis was home to spiritually advanced beings who possessed psychic abilities and secret knowledge of the universe. According to these beliefs, Atlanteans misused their powers, leading to their downfall. While these ideas are not supported by historical evidence, they have significantly influenced popular culture and New Age spirituality, shaping how Atlantis is perceived today. The persistence of Atlantis in human consciousness reveals much about our relationship with the past. The legend endures because it speaks to universal themes: the fragility of civilization, the consequences of arrogance, and the hope that ancient wisdom might still be recovered. Atlantis also reflects humanity's fascination with hidden worlds and lost histories, suggesting that we are never fully satisfied with the official narratives of the past. The idea that something magnificent has been forgotten or buried beneath time and water is both haunting and inspiring. Scientific skepticism remains strong, for good reason. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far, no discovery has conclusively proven the existence of Atlantis, as described by Plato. Yet, skepticism does not diminish the value of the search itself. Investigations inspired by Atlantis have contributed to genuine scientific discoveries, including advances in oceanography, geology, and archaeology. In this way, the myth has expanded human knowledge, even if the city itself remains elusive. As researchers continue to explore the depths of the oceans and re-examine ancient texts, the story of Atlantis evolves with each generation. New technologies may one day uncover evidence that reshapes our understanding of early civilization, while new interpretations of old sources may reveal meanings previously overlooked. Atlantis exists in this space of uncertainty, where imagination and evidence intersect, inviting endless exploration. Part 2 of The Mystery of Atlantis thus deepens the question rather than answering it. It shows how a single story can inspire countless theories, spanning continents and centuries. Whether Atlantis was a real place swallowed by the sea, a distorted memory of ancient disasters, or a philosophical myth crafted to convey timeless lessons, its mystery continues to challenge our understanding of history. The search for Atlantis is ultimately a search for ourselves, for our origins, our mistakes, and our enduring desire to believe that the past still holds secrets waiting to be discovered.
The mystery of Atlantis enters its most complex and intellectually challenging phase when ancient texts, timelines, and scientific interpretations are examined together. While Plato remains the primary source of the Atlantis narrative, his writings did not emerge in isolation. Ancient Greece was deeply influenced by earlier civilizations, particularly Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Near East, all of which preserved long traditions of myth, cosmology, and historical memory. Plato's claim that the story of Atlantis was recorded by Egyptian priests suggests that the legend may have been rooted in much older sources, possibly dating back thousands of years before his time. This raises the crucial question of whether Atlantis represents a real prehistoric civilization or a symbolic retelling of ancient events preserved through oral tradition. Plato's timeline is one of the most controversial aspects of the Atlantis story. He stated that Atlantis existed approximately 9,000 years before Solon's visit to Egypt, placing its destruction around 9600 BCE. For many scholars, this date appears implausible, as it predates the rise of known complex civilizations by several millennia. However, recent archaeological discoveries have challenged traditional assumptions about early human societies. Sites such as Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, dating back to around 9600 BCE, demonstrate that organized, monumental construction was possible far earlier than previously believed. This has led some researchers to reconsider Plato's timeline, suggesting that advanced societies may have existed in forms that have not yet been fully understood or discovered. Ancient maps have also played a significant role in Atlantis research, particularly those that appear to depict land masses not officially recognized until much later. The Piri Reis map of 1513, for example, has been cited by some as evidence of ancient geographical knowledge passed down from lost civilizations. This map shows parts of the Atlantic coastline with surprising accuracy, leading to speculation that it was based on much older source maps. While mainstream historians argue that such maps can be explained through known navigational techniques and later cartographic sources, their existence continues to fuel theories that ancient civilizations possessed advanced knowledge of the world. The interpretation of Plato's language further complicates the Atlantis debate. Plato wrote in a highly symbolic and philosophical style, often using myths to illustrate moral and political ideas. Some scholars argue that Atlantis was never intended to be understood literally, but rather as a fictional counterexample to Plato's ideal society. In this view, the detailed descriptions of Atlantis's wealth, power, and eventual corruption serve to emphasize the dangers of hubris and moral decay. However, others point out that Plato explicitly distinguished Atlantis from fictional myths, presenting it as a true story passed down through trusted sources. This tension between allegory and history lies at the heart of the Atlantis mystery. Modern science has approached Atlantis with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Geology, in particular, challenges the idea of a large island sinking suddenly into the ocean. Plate tectonics shows that land masses move slowly over millions of years rather than disappearing overnight. Yet science also acknowledges that localized subsidence, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis can rapidly alter landscapes. Coastal regions and low-lying islands are especially vulnerable to such events, and many ancient settlements have indeed been lost to the sea. This suggests that while Plato's dramatic account may be exaggerated, it could be based on real geological phenomena. Climate science has added another dimension to the discussion. At the end of the last ice age, global temperatures rose rapidly, causing glaciers to melt and sea levels to rise by more than 100 meters. This process submerged vast coastal plains where early humans likely lived. Some researchers propose that Atlantis may symbolize one or more of these drowned landscapes, remembered as a great civilization lost to the ocean. The emotional impact of such losses could have been preserved in myth, eventually reaching Plato in a highly stylized form. The role of Egypt in the Atlantis story remains particularly intriguing. Egyptian civilization was renowned for its meticulous record-keeping and reverence for the past. Temples and libraries preserved texts that spanned thousands of years, and priests often served as guardians of ancient knowledge. If Egyptian priests did share a story of a great lost civilization with Solon, it is possible that they were referencing events far older than Greek history. However, no surviving Egyptian text explicitly mentions Atlantis, leaving this connection tantalizing but unproven. Comparative mythology provides further insight into the Atlantis legend. Stories of lost lands and sunken cities appear in cultures around the world, from the sunken land of Lyonesse in Celtic tradition to the drowned city of Dwarka in Indian mythology. These recurring themes suggest a shared human experience of environmental change and disaster. Rather than pointing to a single lost civilization, Atlantis may represent a universal archetype, a collective memory of humanity's vulnerability to nature. Archaeology continues to uncover evidence that reshapes our understanding of early human capability. Discoveries of ancient tools, settlements, and monuments indicate that prehistoric societies were more sophisticated than once believed. While none of these findings confirm the existence of Atlantis, they do challenge the assumption that advanced organization and knowledge were impossible in deep antiquity. This opens the door, however slightly, to the possibility that Plato's story reflects a distorted memory of a real but forgotten culture. The psychological appeal of Atlantis cannot be ignored. The idea of a lost golden age resonates deeply with human longing for meaning and continuity. Atlantis represents a time when humanity was supposedly closer to perfection, only to fall due to its own flaws. This narrative mirrors many religious and philosophical traditions, including the concept of Eden or a primordial age of harmony. In this sense, Atlantis functions as a mirror for modern society, reflecting our fears about technological overreach and environmental collapse. Popular culture has further shaped perceptions of Atlantis, often blending science fiction with ancient myth. Films, novels, and television series portray Atlantis as a technologically superior civilization, complete with advanced energy sources and futuristic architecture. While these portrayals are imaginative rather than historical, they influence public understanding of the myth and keep interest alive. The line between scholarly inquiry and entertainment has become increasingly blurred, complicating serious discussion of the subject.
Despite centuries of investigation, Atlantis remains elusive. No definitive ruins, inscriptions, or artifacts have been found that match Plato's detailed description. Yet, the absence of evidence does not necessarily mean the end of the story. Much of the ocean floor remains unexplored, and archaeological methods continue to improve. Future discoveries may yet reveal new insights into ancient coastal civilizations that could shed light on the origins of the Atlantis legend. Part 3 of The Mystery of Atlantis highlights the enduring tension between myth and science. It shows how ancient texts, geological evidence, and modern interpretations intersect in complex and often contradictory ways. Atlantis may never be proven as a physical place, but its significance lies in the questions it raises about history, memory, and human ambition. The legend challenges us to reconsider what we know about the past and to remain open to the possibility that history still holds secrets beyond our current understanding. As the exploration of Atlantis continues, it becomes clear that the true mystery may not be the location of a lost city, but the nature of human storytelling itself. Atlantis endures because it exists at the boundary between fact and imagination, where certainty fades and curiosity thrives. In this space, the legend of Atlantis continues to inspire inquiry, debate, and wonder, ensuring that its mystery will never be truly lost to the depths of time.
The final chapter of The Mystery of Atlantis moves beyond the question of where the lost civilization might have been and asks a deeper, more enduring question. Why does Atlantis still matter? After thousands of years, despite the absence of definitive proof, the legend continues to captivate scholars, writers, scientists, and ordinary people alike. This persistence suggests that Atlantis is more than a geographical puzzle. It is a powerful idea that speaks to humanity's understanding of progress, morality, destruction, and memory. In many ways, Atlantis functions as a timeless mirror, reflecting both the highest aspirations and the deepest fears of civilization. At its core, the story of Atlantis is a philosophical warning. Plato described Atlantis as a society that began in harmony, blessed by the gods, rich in resources, and guided by wisdom. Over time, however, the Atlanteans grew arrogant, greedy, and morally corrupt. Their pursuit of power replaced their sense of balance, and their advanced abilities were no longer guided by virtue. This moral decline ultimately led to their destruction. Plato's message is clear. Technological and material advancement without ethical responsibility leads to ruin. This lesson remains strikingly relevant in the modern world, where humanity possesses unprecedented power over nature, but often lacks the wisdom to use it wisely. Atlantis also represents the concept of a lost golden age, a theme found across cultures and civilizations. From the Garden of Eden to the Hindu Satya Yuga, many traditions speak of an earlier time when humanity lived in greater harmony with the natural world. Atlantis fits into this universal pattern, symbolizing a moment when civilization reached extraordinary heights before collapsing. Whether or not such a golden age truly existed is less important than what the idea represents. It reflects a deep human longing for meaning, balance, and a sense of origin, suggesting that modern society feels disconnected from something essential that once was. In the context of modern civilization, Atlantis has taken on new significance as environmental concerns grow more urgent. Rising sea levels, climate change, earthquakes, and extreme weather events increasingly threaten coastal cities and entire nations. What once seemed like a mythical catastrophe now feels disturbingly plausible. Cities such as Venice, Miami, and parts of Bangladesh face real risks of submersion due to environmental changes. In this light, Atlantis no longer feels like an ancient fantasy, but a potential future scenario. The legend serves as a reminder that no civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to the forces of nature. The psychological power of Atlantis lies in its sudden disappearance.
Unlike civilizations that declined slowly, Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night, according to Plato. This idea of instant collapse taps into a deep fear within the human psyche, the fear that everything we have built could vanish without warning. History offers many examples that echo this fear, from the fall of Pompeii to the collapse of modern cities due to war or disaster. Atlantis magnifies this anxiety on a global scale, transforming it into a universal symbol of impermanence. Atlantis also challenges how history is defined and recorded. Much of what we consider historical truth depends on written records, which are fragile and incomplete. Entire cultures have vanished without leaving clear traces behind. Libraries burned, cities sank, and oral traditions faded. The possibility that a significant civilization could be lost to time forces us to question the limits of historical knowledge. Atlantis reminds us that history is not a complete record of the past, but a fragmented narrative shaped by survival, chance, and interpretation. In modern philosophy and literature, Atlantis has often been used as a metaphor for lost knowledge. Some interpretations suggest that Atlanteans possessed wisdom that modern humanity has forgotten, whether spiritual insight, sustainable living practices, or a deeper understanding of nature. This idea resonates strongly in an age where technological progress often feels disconnected from ethical and spiritual growth. The search for Atlantis, in this sense, becomes a search for forgotten values rather than physical ruins. The scientific community, while skeptical of Atlantis as a literal place, has indirectly benefited from the legend. The desire to explore the ocean floor, study ancient coastlines, and understand prehistoric climate change has been fueled in part by myths like Atlantis. Advances in underwater archaeology, sonar mapping, and climate science have expanded human knowledge far beyond what was possible even a century ago. Even if Atlantis itself is never found, the curiosity it inspires continues to push the boundaries of exploration and discovery. Atlantis also occupies a unique position between myth and science, illustrating how these two ways of understanding the world can coexist. Myths are not merely false stories, they are symbolic narratives that encode cultural memory and human experience. Science, on the other hand, seeks measurable evidence and testable explanations. Atlantis exists at the intersection of these approaches, reminding us that truth can take multiple forms. A story does not need to be literally true to carry profound meaning. In popular culture, Atlantis has evolved into a symbol of advanced lost technology and hidden civilizations. While these portrayals often exaggerate or distort the original story, they reveal a widespread fascination with the idea that humanity's past may have been more complex than traditionally believed. This fascination challenges linear views of progress and suggests that history may be cyclical rather than purely evolutionary. Civilizations rise, reach peaks of innovation, and then collapse, leaving behind fragments that later generations struggle to interpret. The enduring mystery of Atlantis also reflects humanity's relationship with the unknown. Humans are naturally drawn to unanswered questions, especially those that exist just beyond the reach of certainty. Atlantis occupies this space perfectly. It is detailed enough to feel real, but elusive enough to resist confirmation. This balance keeps the legend alive, allowing each generation to reinterpret it according to its own fears, hopes, and knowledge. From a moral perspective, Atlantis serves as a cautionary tale about imbalance. The Atlanteans were not destroyed because they lacked power, but because they misused it. This lesson resonates in an age of nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, and environmental exploitation. Humanity now faces choices similar to those described in Plato's story, whether to pursue dominance at any cost or to align progress with responsibility and restraint. Atlantis warns that ignoring this balance can lead to irreversible consequences. Ultimately, the mystery of Atlantis may never be solved in a traditional sense. No expedition may uncover its capital, no inscription may confirm its kings, and no artifact may definitively prove its existence. Yet this uncertainty does not diminish its importance. On the contrary, it enhances it. Atlantis survives precisely because it cannot be fully explained. It lives in the space between memory and imagination, history and philosophy, fear and hope. As the final part of this exploration, Atlantis stands not as a destination, but as a question. It asks what kind of civilization humanity wants to become and what lessons it is willing to learn from the past. Whether Atlantis was a real place, a distorted memory of ancient disasters, or a philosophical invention, its message remains timeless. Civilizations are fragile, power demands wisdom, and the past is never as distant as it seems. In the end, Atlantis is not lost beneath the ocean alone. It exists within human consciousness, resurfacing whenever societies confront their own limits. The true mystery of Atlantis is not where it sank, but why its story continues to rise again and again from the depths of time.
The mystery of Atlantis does not truly end with conclusions or final interpretations, because its greatest power lies in its ability to evolve with human thought. As humanity advances into new eras of knowledge, technology, and self-awareness, Atlantis continues to transform in meaning. In Part 5, the legend of Atlantis can be understood not as a single lost civilization, but as a recurring pattern in human history, a cycle of rise, dominance, imbalance, and collapse. This perspective shifts the focus away from finding Atlantis as a physical location and toward recognizing it as a recurring warning embedded within the human story. Throughout history, powerful civilizations have often believed themselves to be invincible. From ancient empires to modern superpowers, confidence in technological superiority and economic strength has repeatedly led societies to underestimate their vulnerabilities. Atlantis represents the ultimate expression of this illusion. According to Plato, the Atlanteans possessed immense resources, advanced engineering, and military dominance, yet they failed to maintain moral balance. This pattern mirrors the fate of many historical civilizations, such as Rome, which collapsed not solely due to external invasion, but because of internal decay, inequality, and overextension. In this sense, Atlantis becomes a symbolic ancestor of every fallen empire. One of the most compelling modern interpretations of Atlantis views it as a memory of global catastrophe rather than a single city. Geological and climate research increasingly suggests that humanity has survived multiple periods of dramatic environmental change. Massive floods, volcanic winters, and abrupt climate shifts would have devastated early human settlements, particularly those located near coastlines and rivers. Survivors of such events may have carried stories of lost homelands, which over generations evolved into legends of entire civilizations swallowed by the sea. Atlantis, then, may represent the emotional truth of loss rather than a literal historical record. The human brain is uniquely skilled at preserving meaning even when details fade. Oral traditions, myths, and symbolic stories allow societies to transmit lessons across vast stretches of time. Atlantis may be one such vessel of memory, encoding the consequences of environmental neglect and moral imbalance in a narrative powerful enough to survive millennia. The dramatic imagery of a great island sinking in a single day may not be factual in a scientific sense, but it effectively communicates the suddenness with which stability can be destroyed. In a world increasingly aware of tipping points and irreversible change, this message feels especially urgent. Atlantis also invites reflection on humanity's relationship with technology. In many modern retellings, Atlanteans are depicted as possessing advanced machines, energy systems, or scientific knowledge far beyond that of their time. While these portrayals are speculative,
They reveal a deep-seated anxiety about technological progress outpacing ethical development. This fear is not new. Plato himself was concerned about the misuse of power and knowledge. Today, similar concerns arise around artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and environmental exploitation. Atlantis becomes a cautionary symbol, reminding humanity that innovation without wisdom can accelerate destruction rather than prevent it. Another endearing aspect of the Atlantis legend is its connection to the ocean, a realm that remains largely unexplored even today. The sea has always symbolized mystery, danger, and the unknown. By placing Atlantis beneath the waves, the story situates lost knowledge in a space that is both physically and psychologically distant. The ocean becomes a metaphor for the subconscious, where forgotten memories and suppressed truths reside. The search for Atlantis thus parallels humanity's search for deeper self-understanding, a descent into the unknown in hopes of recovering something valuable that has been lost. Modern archaeology increasingly acknowledges that coastal regions played a crucial role in early human development. Access to marine resources, trade routes, and fertile land made coastlines ideal locations for early settlements. As sea levels rose after the last ice age, many of these communities would have been submerged, erasing their physical traces. This realization has transformed how scholars view ancient history, encouraging exploration of underwater landscapes as legitimate archaeological frontiers. Atlantis, once dismissed as fantasy, now feels aligned with genuine scientific inquiry into submerged prehistory. The legend also raises questions about historical bias. Much of recorded history focuses on civilizations that left durable monuments of stone and metal. Societies that relied on wood, earth, or coastal environments were more vulnerable to disappearance. Atlantis may represent those forgotten cultures that shaped human development but left little physical evidence behind. In this way, the myth challenges the assumption that history is complete or impartial. It suggests that what we know is shaped as much by survival as by significance. Atlantis continues to inspire alternative histories because it offers a sense of mystery missing from strictly evidence-based narratives. Humans are not satisfied with facts alone. They seek meaning, connection, and wonder. The idea that humanity's past may include forgotten chapters appeals to the imagination and encourages humility. It reminds modern society that it may not be as unique or unprecedented as it believes. Other civilizations may have reached great heights before disappearing, leaving behind only whispers in myth. In psychological terms, Atlantis functions as a collective dream. Carl Jung described myths as expressions of the collective unconscious, reflecting shared fears and desires. Atlantis embodies the fear of collapse and the desire for lost perfection. It represents both punishment and nostalgia, destruction and longing. This dual nature explains why the legend remains emotionally powerful, even in an age dominated by scientific thinking. Atlantis speaks to aspects of human experience that data alone cannot address. The modern world's fascination with apocalypse further strengthens the relevance of Atlantis. Films, literature, and media frequently explore scenarios of sudden global collapse, whether through natural disaster, war, or technological failure. These stories echo the core structure of the Atlantis myth, a powerful civilization undone by forces it failed to control. By revisiting Atlantis, humanity rehearses its fears and hopes, exploring what might be lost and what might endure. From an ethical perspective, Atlantis challenges humanity to reconsider its values. Wealth, expansion, and dominance are shown to be insufficient foundations for lasting civilization. Balance, restraint, and respect for natural limits emerge as essential qualities. This lesson resonates strongly in a time of environmental crisis, where short-term gains often come at long-term cost. Atlantis stands as a reminder that sustainability is not a modern concept, but a timeless necessity. The question of whether Atlantis was real may ultimately be less important than what the story continues to teach. Myths survive because they remain useful, adapting to new contexts while preserving core truths. Atlantis has survived because it continues to speak to humanity's condition. Each generation finds new meaning in its depths, whether as a warning about climate change, a metaphor for lost wisdom, or a symbol of forgotten history. As exploration of the oceans and ancient landscapes continues, it is possible that future discoveries will further blur the line between myth and history. New underwater ruins, ancient tools, or submerged settlements may not confirm Atlantis as Plato described it, but they may validate the broader idea that humanity's past is far richer and more complex than previously assumed. In this way, Atlantis serves as a gateway rather than a destination, encouraging curiosity and openness rather than certainty. Part 5 of The Mystery of Atlantis thus reinforces a profound realization. Atlantis is not confined to the past. It exists wherever civilizations ignore balance, wherever power exceeds wisdom, and wherever humanity forgets its dependence on the natural world. Atlantis rises and falls repeatedly, not as a single city, but as a pattern woven into human history. The legend endures because it refuses to remain silent. It resurfaces whenever societies stand at the edge of transformation, warning of what may happen if lessons are ignored. Atlantis is not merely a lost world beneath the sea. It is a living idea.
The mystery of Atlantis is no longer confined to the distant past or abstract symbolism. It emerges as a powerful lens through which humanity can examine its possible future. Atlantis becomes a warning story, not only about what once may have happened, but about what could happen again. As modern civilization reaches unprecedented levels of technological advancement, population growth, and environmental impact, the echoes of Atlantis feel increasingly relevant. The legend shifts from a historical puzzle into a future-oriented reflection, urging humanity to confront the consequences of its choices before they become irreversible. One of the most striking parallels between Atlantis and the modern world lies in the concept of dominance over nature. Plato described Atlantis as a civilization that mastered its environment, reshaping land and sea through engineering and ambition. Today, humanity has achieved a similar level of control, constructing megacities, altering rivers, extracting resources from the depths of the earth, and even manipulating genetic code. While these achievements demonstrate extraordinary intelligence and creativity, they also reveal a dangerous imbalance. Like Atlantis, modern society often assumes that control equates to security, overlooking the fragility that lies beneath apparent strength. Climate change represents perhaps the clearest modern reflection of the Atlantis warning. Rising sea levels threaten coastal cities and island nations, while extreme weather events disrupt food systems and economies. Scientific projections suggest that entire regions may become uninhabitable within generations. This mirrors the sudden and total loss described in the Atlantis legend, where a flourishing civilization vanished beneath the sea. The difference is that today's warning comes not from myth, but from data. Yet the human response remains uncertain, echoing the Atlanteans' failure to change course despite clear signs of imbalance. Atlantis also speaks to the dangers of inequality and moral fragmentation. Plato emphasized that Atlantis fell when its rulers abandoned virtue in favor of wealth and power. Modern civilization faces a similar challenge as economic inequality widens and social cohesion weakens. Advanced technology coexists with widespread poverty, and global connectivity contrasts sharply with political division.
History shows that civilizations rarely collapse solely due to external forces. They weaken from within. Atlantis serves as a reminder that internal decay can be as destructive as natural disaster. Another powerful aspect of the Atlantis warning lies in its portrayal of speed. The destruction of Atlantis occurred in a single day and night, symbolizing how rapidly stability can dissolve. In the modern world, systems are deeply interconnected, meaning that crises can cascade with alarming speed. Financial markets collapse in hours, digital infrastructure can fail instantly, and environmental tipping points may trigger sudden, irreversible change. Atlantis captures this vulnerability long before modern complexity made it a reality. Technological optimism often assumes that innovation will solve every problem. However, the Atlantis narrative challenges this belief. The Atlanteans were technologically advanced, yet their knowledge did not save them. This suggests that technology alone is insufficient without ethical guidance and long-term thinking. In the present era, artificial intelligence, automation, and biotechnology hold immense promise, but they also raise profound ethical questions. Atlantis warns that progress without wisdom can accelerate collapse rather than prevent it. The story of Atlantis also highlights humanity's tendency to ignore warnings. Plato implied that the Atlanteans were given opportunities to correct their path, yet they continued toward destruction. Modern society faces a similar pattern. Scientific warnings about climate change, biodiversity loss, and resource depletion are widely known, yet meaningful action often lags behind awareness. This psychological resistance to inconvenient truths reflects a timeless human flaw, one that Atlantis encapsulates with haunting clarity. In a broader sense, Atlantis represents the limits of growth. No system can expand indefinitely without consequence. Ancient myths often understood this intuitively, embedding the concept of balance into their narratives. Modern economic models, however, frequently prioritize continuous growth, even in a finite world. Atlantis challenges this assumption, illustrating that unchecked expansion ultimately leads to collapse. The lesson is not anti-progress, but pro-balance, emphasizing sustainability over domination. The future-oriented interpretation of Atlantis also extends beyond environmental concerns to cultural and spiritual dimensions. Many modern societies experience a sense of disconnection, where technological convenience replaces meaningful human connection. Atlantis, often portrayed as spiritually corrupted before its fall, reflects this loss of inner balance. The legend suggests that civilizations collapse not only when they damage their environment, but when they lose their moral and cultural foundations. Atlantis also serves as a reminder of humility. The belief that modern civilization is uniquely advanced or immune to collapse is a dangerous illusion. History repeatedly demonstrates that no society is permanent. By imagining a civilization greater than our own that still fell, Atlantis humbles humanity, encouraging reflection rather than arrogance. This humility is essential for long-term survival in an increasingly complex and fragile world. The oceanic fate of Atlantis carries symbolic weight for the future as well. Water, as both life-giving and destructive, represents the dual nature of nature itself. Rising seas, melting ice, and changing rainfall patterns underscore humanity's dependence on forces beyond its control. Atlantis beneath the waves becomes a vision of what happens when this dependence is ignored. It is not a threat, but a reminder of reality. In modern storytelling, Atlantis increasingly appears in speculative futures rather than ancient pasts. Writers and filmmakers reimagine it as a warning civilization, drawing parallels to contemporary issues. These creative interpretations keep the legend alive, allowing it to evolve alongside human concerns. Atlantis adapts because its core message is flexible, yet enduring, capable of addressing new challenges without losing its essence.
From an educational perspective, Atlantis offers a unique tool for engaging people with complex global issues. Myths can communicate emotional truths more effectively than statistics alone. By framing modern challenges through the lens of Atlantis, educators and thinkers can make abstract risks feel personal and urgent. The legend transforms distant futures into relatable narratives, encouraging reflection and responsibility. The mystery of Atlantis as a future warning also emphasizes choice. Unlike a determined fate, the story implies that collapse results from decisions. The gods punished Atlantis not arbitrarily, but in response to its actions. Similarly, humanity's future is not fixed. The same intelligence that created modern civilization can also preserve it, if guided by wisdom and restraint. Atlantis does not predict doom, it offers a chance to avoid it. As humanity stands at a crossroads defined by climate change, technological acceleration, and global interdependence, Atlantis feels less like a lost world and more like a shadow of possible futures. It asks whether modern society will learn from patterns of the past or repeat them on a larger scale. The legend endures because it refuses to provide comfort, instead demanding awareness and responsibility. In Part 6, Atlantis emerges as a living warning, not buried beneath the ocean, but embedded in human consciousness. It speaks across time, reminding each generation that greatness alone does not ensure survival. Balance, humility, and ethical responsibility are the true foundations of lasting civilization. Atlantis fell because it forgot this truth, and its story survives so that humanity might remember. Ultimately, the future of Atlantis is the future of humanity itself. Whether the legend remains a cautionary tale or becomes a prophecy depends on how its lessons are understood and applied. Atlantis does not ask to be found, it asks to be remembered. As long as humanity continues to shape the world with immense power, the mystery of Atlantis will remain relevant, not as a lost city of the past, but as a warning written into the future.
The mystery of Atlantis is examined through a direct comparison with modern civilization, revealing striking similarities that make the ancient legend feel uncannily contemporary. Atlantis, as described by Plato, was not merely advanced for its time. It was a global power, rich in resources, engineering skill, and political influence. Modern civilization, though vastly different in form, reflects many of the same characteristics. Both represent peaks of human achievement, and both carry within them the seeds of potential collapse. This comparison transforms Atlantis from a distant myth into a reflective model through which modern humanity can evaluate its own trajectory. Atlantis was portrayed as a civilization that mastered infrastructure. Plato described vast canals, harbors, bridges, and carefully planned cities designed to maximize efficiency and control. Modern civilization mirrors this obsession with infrastructure through highways, megacities, dams, and digital networks that span the globe. These systems create comfort, connectivity, and economic power, but they also introduce fragility. When infrastructure fails, entire societies can be disrupted within hours. Atlantis reminds us that complexity, while impressive, can amplify vulnerability rather than eliminate it. Another profound similarity lies in globalization. Atlantis was said to rule over many lands and peoples, extending its influence far beyond its island borders. Today's world is more interconnected than ever, with economies, supply chains, and cultures deeply intertwined. This interconnectedness brings prosperity and innovation, but it also means that crises spread rapidly. Financial collapse, pandemics, and environmental disasters no longer remain local. Like Atlantis, modern civilization operates as a single vast system where the failure of one part can destabilize the whole. The concentration of power is another shared trait. In Plato's account, Atlantis was governed by kings descended from divine ancestry, holding immense authority over land and people. While modern societies may not be ruled by kings, power is often concentrated in political elites, corporations, and technological institutions. Decision-making that affects billions is frequently removed from everyday citizens. This imbalance creates tension, mistrust, and instability, echoing the moral decay Plato attributed to Atlantis's rulers. Economic abundance played a central role in Atlantis's rise and fall. The island was described as extraordinarily wealthy, overflowing with metals, fertile land, and luxury. Modern civilization, particularly in developed regions, has achieved unprecedented material abundance. However, this wealth is unevenly distributed, leading to inequality and social unrest. Atlantis serves as a reminder that wealth alone does not guarantee stability. When prosperity becomes an end in itself rather than a means to collective well-being, it can accelerate decline. Atlantis's environmental relationship offers one of the clearest parallels to the modern world. Plato suggested that the Atlanteans reshaped their environment extensively, extracting resources and altering landscapes. Today, humanity has transformed the planet on a scale unmatched in history. Forests are cleared, oceans are polluted, and ecosystems are pushed to their limits. Atlantis symbolizes the moment when environmental manipulation crosses into environmental disregard, a threshold modern civilization may be approaching. Modern technology amplifies this parallel even further. While Atlantean technology remains largely symbolic, it represents advanced knowledge used to dominate nature. Modern technology, from fossil fuel extraction to artificial intelligence, grants humanity immense power. Yet this power often advances faster than ethical frameworks can adapt. Atlantis warns that intelligence without restraint can become destructive, turning tools of progress into instruments of collapse. Social cohesion is another area of comparison. Plato implied that Atlantis lost its unity as greed and ambition overtook shared values. Modern societies face similar challenges, with polarization, cultural fragmentation, and declining trust in institutions. Digital communication, while connecting people globally, often deepens divisions and accelerates conflict. Atlantis reflects the danger of losing a shared moral foundation, without which even the most advanced society can fracture. The speed of change further links Atlantis to the modern era. The legend emphasizes sudden destruction, a rapid shift from stability to chaos. In the modern world, technological acceleration and global interdependence mean that change occurs faster than human psychology can easily manage. Economic crashes, political upheavals, and environmental tipping points can unfold with an alarming speed. Atlantis captures this sense of instability long before modern systems made it tangible. Atlantis also highlights the illusion of permanence. The Atlanteans believed their civilization was secure, protected by wealth, power, and divine favor. Modern society often holds a similar belief, assuming that progress is irreversible. History repeatedly disproves this assumption. Empires fall, technologies become obsolete, and societies transform or disappear. Atlantis serves as a reminder that permanence is an illusion, and adaptability is essential for survival. Culturally, Atlantis reflects humanity's recurring struggle between wisdom and ambition. Plato contrasted the disciplined society of Athens with the excesses of Atlantis. Modern society faces a similar tension between sustainable living and unchecked consumption. The challenge is not to reject progress, but to guide it with values that prioritize long-term stability over short-term gain. Atlantis illustrates what happens when ambition overwhelms wisdom. From a psychological perspective, Atlantis represents collective denial. The Atlanteans, according to the story, failed to recognize the consequences of their actions until it was too late. Modern society often exhibits this same pattern, acknowledging risks intellectually while resisting meaningful change.
Climate change, resource depletion, and social inequality are widely discussed, yet action remains fragmented. Atlantis embodies the cost of delayed response. The comparison also extends to resilience. Atlantis appears to have relied heavily on centralized systems and concentrated power. When collapse came, it was total. Modern society similarly depends on centralized energy grids, supply chains, and digital infrastructure. This efficiency increases vulnerability. Atlantis suggests that resilience lies not in dominance, but in balance, diversity, and decentralization. Atlantis's destruction beneath the sea carries symbolic relevance for the modern age. Water represents both life and loss. Rising sea levels threaten coastal populations, echoing the fate of the legendary island. This parallel transforms Atlantis into a visual metaphor for climate risk, making abstract data emotionally resonant. The image of a great civilization submerged serves as a warning written in mythic language. Despite these parallels, Atlantis also offers hope. The story implies that collapse was not inevitable, but the result of choices. Modern society still has the capacity to learn, adapt, and change course. Unlike Atlantis, humanity possesses global scientific knowledge and historical awareness. The legend challenges modern society to use this awareness wisely, rather than repeating familiar patterns on a larger scale. Atlantis ultimately functions as a comparative mirror. By examining its rise and fall alongside modern civilization, humanity gains perspective on its own strengths and weaknesses. The legend encourages humility, reminding us that intelligence and power must be guided by ethics, balance, and respect for natural limits. Without these, progress becomes fragile. In Part 7, Atlantis stands not as a rival to modern civilization, but as its reflection. The similarities are not meant to predict inevitable disaster, but to illuminate potential paths. Atlantis warns, but it also teaches. It suggests that the survival of civilization depends not on how advanced it becomes, but on how wisely it chooses to live. As modern humanity continues to shape the planet and its own future, the comparison with Atlantis grows more urgent. The legend asks a simple but profound question. Will modern civilization learn from the patterns of the past, or will it, like Atlantis, believe itself immune until the moment of collapse? The answer remains unwritten, but the story of Atlantis endures to remind us that history, myth, and future are deeply intertwined.
The mystery of Atlantis reaches its most reflective and human-centered dimension, focusing on choice, responsibility, and the future that lies ahead. After examining Atlantis through history, science, philosophy, psychology, and modern comparison, one truth becomes clear. Atlantis is not merely a story about what was lost, but about what can still be saved. The legend endures because it presents humanity with a silent question rather than a fixed conclusion. It asks whether civilization is capable of learning from its own patterns, or whether it is destined to repeat them under new names and technologies. Atlantis represents a moment when intelligence outpaced wisdom. The Atlanteans were not destroyed because they were weak or ignorant, but because they failed to align power with responsibility. This distinction is crucial for understanding its relevance today. Modern civilization possesses extraordinary knowledge, yet knowledge alone does not guarantee survival. Without ethical grounding, foresight, and restraint, intelligence can magnify harm as easily as it produces progress. Atlantis stands as a reminder that the measure of a civilization is not how much it can build, but how well it understands the consequences of what it builds. The legend also emphasizes the role of collective choice. Atlantis did not fall because of a single decision or event, but because of a gradual shift in values. Over time, ambition replaced balance, dominance replaced cooperation, and excess replaced moderation. This slow moral drift made sudden collapse possible.
Modern societies face similar gradual shifts, often unnoticed until they reach a critical point. Atlantis teaches that collapse is rarely accidental. It is usually the result of many small choices made without reflection. One of the most powerful aspects of Atlantis is its silence after destruction. Once the island sank, there were no survivors to tell its story directly. Only fragments remained, preserved through memory and myth. This silence symbolizes what is lost when civilizations fail. Languages, knowledge, art, relationships, and ways of understanding the world. It reminds humanity that cultural extinction can be as devastating as physical destruction. Modern civilization, with its vast digital records, may seem immune to such loss. Yet history shows that information alone cannot preserve meaning without living communities to carry it forward. Atlantis also reframes the idea of progress. Modern culture often assumes that progress is linear and irreversible, moving steadily toward improvement. The Atlantis story challenges this assumption by presenting progress as fragile and conditional. Advancement without balance leads not upward, but downward. This perspective encourages a more humble understanding of human achievement, one that values sustainability and continuity over speed and expansion. The environmental dimension of Atlantis becomes especially important in this final reflection. The image of a civilization swallowed by the sea resonates deeply in an era of rising oceans and climate instability. Atlantis transforms abstract environmental data into a human story of loss and consequence. It reminds us that nature does not negotiate with ambition. Ecological limits exist regardless of belief, and ignoring them carries irreversible cost. Atlantis does not portray nature as an enemy, but as a force that responds to imbalance. Another essential lesson of Atlantis lies in interdependence. The Atlanteans believed themselves separate from the natural and moral order, acting as masters rather than participants. Modern civilization often holds a similar illusion, treating the planet as a resource rather than a living system. Atlantis challenges this worldview, suggesting that survival depends on recognizing interconnectedness. Human systems, natural systems, and moral systems are not separate. They rise and fall together. Atlantis also speaks to the importance of memory. Civilizations that forget their past are more likely to repeat its mistakes. Myths like Atlantis function as cultural memory, preserving lessons long after specific details fade. In a rapidly changing world, where attention is short and history is often simplified, Atlantis urges humanity to remember deeply rather than superficially. Remembering Atlantis is not about believing in a lost city, but about remembering the conditions that lead to collapse. The legend further highlights the danger of arrogance. The Atlanteans believed their power made them untouchable. This belief blinded them to warning signs and silenced dissent. Modern civilization, confident in technology and economic systems, risks similar arrogance. Atlantis reminds us that humility is not weakness, but awareness. It is the recognition that no system is complete, no solution final, and no civilization eternal. From a moral standpoint, Atlantis emphasizes responsibility across generations. The actions of one generation shaped the fate of those who followed. Modern society faces a similar ethical challenge, as decisions made today will affect future generations who have no voice in current choices. Atlantis frames this responsibility in stark terms, showing the cost of prioritizing immediate gain over long-term stability. Atlantis also invites reflection on leadership. Plato portrayed the rulers of Atlantis as initially virtuous, later corrupted by power. This transformation highlights the importance of accountability and ethical leadership. Systems that concentrate power without oversight create conditions for abuse. Modern societies, though more complex, face the same risk. Atlantis serves as a reminder that leadership without integrity accelerates decline. The enduring mystery of Atlantis lies in its openness. Unlike historical events with clear beginnings and endings, Atlantis remains unresolved. This openness allows each generation to reinterpret it according to its own challenges. In this sense, Atlantis is not static, it evolves alongside humanity. Its meaning shifts as new knowledge emerges, but its core warning remains unchanged. As humanity stands at a crossroads shaped by technological acceleration, environmental pressure, and global interconnectedness, Atlantis feels less like an ancient myth and more like a conversation partner. It does not predict disaster, but it refuses to guarantee safety. It asks whether humanity will choose balance over excess, cooperation over domination, and wisdom over unchecked ambition. In Part 8, Atlantis becomes a story about agency. The future is not predetermined. Collapse is not inevitable. The same creativity that built civilizations can also preserve them. Atlantis does not condemn humanity, it challenges it. It suggests that awareness is the first step to change, and that learning from patterns is the key to breaking them. Ultimately, Atlantis is not a place to be found, but a lesson to be understood. Its true location is not beneath the ocean, but within human behavior and decision-making. Wherever power grows faster than wisdom, Atlantis exists. Wherever balance is ignored, Atlantis begins to sink. The mystery of Atlantis endures because it addresses the most fundamental human question: how should we live? It reminds us that survival is not guaranteed by intelligence alone, but by values, restraint, and respect for limits. Atlantis fell when it forgot this truth. Its story survives so that humanity does not. As this part concludes, Atlantis stands as both a warning and a possibility. It warns of what happens when civilizations lose balance, but it also suggests that awareness can change outcomes. The legend remains unfinished because humanity's story is unfinished. Whether Atlantis remains a myth of the past or becomes a metaphor for the future depends on the choices yet to be made. In the end, Atlantis is not asking to be believed, it is asking to be remembered.
The mystery of Atlantis reaches its most introspective and universal dimension, where the legend is no longer viewed as history, warning, or comparison alone, but as a reflection of human identity itself. After traveling through interpretations of Atlantis as a lost civilization, a moral lesson, a future warning, and a mirror of modern society, one realization becomes unavoidable. Atlantis endures because it expresses something fundamental about the human condition. It is not only a story about civilization collapsing, but about humanity's constant struggle to balance creation and destruction, memory and forgetting, hope and fear. Atlantis represents the human desire to believe that greatness once existed in a purer form. This belief comforts and unsettles at the same time. It comforts because it suggests that humanity is capable of extraordinary harmony and intelligence. It unsettles because it reminds us that even such greatness can be lost. This dual emotion explains why Atlantis continues to fascinate across cultures and centuries. The legend allows humanity to imagine both its highest potential and its deepest failure within a single narrative. At its deepest level, Atlantis is a story about forgetting. Plato emphasized that Atlantis fell after losing its divine balance, after forgetting the principles that once guided it. Forgetting is one of humanity's most dangerous weaknesses. Societies forget why systems were created, why limits were set, and why values mattered. Over time, rules become burdens, ethics become obstacles, and restraint becomes weakness. Atlantis captures the moment when forgetting overtakes wisdom, making collapse not sudden but inevitable. Modern civilization faces this same danger of forgetting. Surrounded by technology, speed, and abundance, it becomes easy to forget dependence on nature, community, and shared responsibility.
Atlantis reminds us that forgetting does not erase consequences. The ocean did not swallow Atlantis because it was cruel, but because balance was broken. In this sense, Atlantis is not a punishment story, but a consequence story. It teaches that actions ripple forward, often long after intentions are forgotten. Atlantis also explores the illusion of control. The Atlanteans believed their engineering, wealth, and power placed them above uncertainty. Modern humanity often holds a similar belief, trusting systems, algorithms, and institutions to manage risk. Yet history repeatedly shows that control is partial and temporary. Unexpected events, whether natural or human-made, expose the fragility beneath apparent stability. Atlantis reminds us that control without humility becomes blindness. Another profound theme of Atlantis is silence. After its destruction, Atlantis left no voice, no testimony, no defense. Silence followed greatness. This silence symbolizes what happens when civilizations collapse. Stories end, songs disappear, and meaning dissolves. Modern society, obsessed with constant communication, rarely considers silence as a consequence. Atlantis forces us to imagine a world where voices vanish, reminding us that cultural survival matters as much as physical survival. Atlantis also challenges the idea that intelligence guarantees wisdom. The Atlanteans were intelligent, innovative, and organized, yet they failed to act wisely. This distinction is critical today. Modern society produces vast knowledge but struggles to apply it ethically. Data does not automatically create understanding, and information does not ensure responsibility. Atlantis warns that intelligence without wisdom accelerates collapse by making mistakes more powerful. The legend further highlights the danger of distance between decision-makers and consequences. In Atlantis, rulers became detached from the people and the land they governed. Modern systems often replicate this distance through bureaucracy, globalization, and abstraction. Decisions affecting millions are made far from their human and environmental impact. Atlantis reminds us that decision-makers lose connection to consequence. Imbalance grows. Atlantis also speaks to the fragility of memory. The story survived only because fragments were passed down through generations. How many other stories were lost completely? How many civilizations vanished without myth or record? Atlantis stands as a symbol for all forgotten histories, reminding humanity that survival of memory is uncertain. This awareness challenges modern assumptions about permanence, even in the digital age. The ocean beneath which Atlantis rests symbolizes the unknown future as much as the unknown past. Just as the depths hide what was lost, the future hides what is yet to come. Atlantis becomes a bridge between these unknowns, connecting memory and imagination. It encourages humility toward both past and future, reminding us that certainty is rare and fragility is constant. Atlantis also reveals humanity's fascination with endings. Stories of collapse captivate because they force reflection. They strip away illusions and reveal essentials. Atlantis does not glorify destruction, it uses it to expose truth. When everything falls away, what remains? Values, relationships, and meaning become visible only when threatened. Atlantis survives because it makes these invisible foundations visible. In psychological terms, Atlantis functions as a collective shadow. It contains fears humanity prefers not to face: collapse, loss, irrelevance, and self-destruction. By placing these fears in a distant myth, humanity can examine them safely. Atlantis allows confrontation without immediate danger, making it a powerful tool for reflection. Ignoring the shadow, however, does not remove it. Atlantis persists because the shadow persists. The legend also challenges progress narratives that deny limits. Modern culture often celebrates endless growth, innovation, and expansion. Atlantis contradicts this narrative by showing that growth without balance leads to collapse.
It does not reject progress, but it reframes it. True progress includes preservation, restraint, and awareness of limits. Atlantis teaches that survival depends not on speed, but on balance. Atlantis also carries a message about responsibility beyond the present. The Atlanteans did not collapse alone. Their actions erased futures. Modern society faces a similar ethical horizon. Decisions made today shape worlds that future generations must inhabit. Atlantis gives this responsibility emotional weight, transforming abstract ethics into lived consequence. The enduring power of Atlantis lies in its openness. It refuses to resolve into certainty. It cannot be proven or disproven completely. This ambiguity keeps it alive, allowing reinterpretation as humanity changes. Atlantis is not a closed story. It is an ongoing dialogue between past, present, and future. As Part 9 unfolds, Atlantis becomes less about loss and more about awareness. Awareness of fragility, awareness of responsibility, awareness of connection. The legend suggests that collapse is not destiny, but possibility. Possibility can be avoided through understanding, humility, and choice. Atlantis also reminds humanity that survival is not purely physical. Civilizations can survive materially while collapsing morally, culturally, or spiritually. Atlantis fell when inner balance was lost before outer destruction occurred. This lesson challenges modern society to measure success not only by wealth or technology, but by cohesion, meaning, and care. In the end, Atlantis stands as a question rather than an answer. It asks whether humanity can remember what matters before forgetting becomes irreversible. It asks whether power can coexist with wisdom and whether progress can coexist with restraint. These questions remain unanswered because they must be answered continuously, not once. The enduring power of Atlantis lies in its openness. It refuses to resolve into certainty. It cannot be proven or disproven completely. This ambiguity keeps it alive, allowing reinterpretation as humanity changes. Atlantis is not a closed story. It is an ongoing dialogue between past, present, and future. As Part 9 unfolds, Atlantis becomes less about loss and more about awareness. Awareness of fragility, awareness of responsibility, awareness of connection. The legend suggests that collapse is not destiny, but possibility. Possibility can be avoided through understanding, humility, and choice. Atlantis also reminds humanity that survival is not purely physical. Civilizations can survive materially while collapsing morally, culturally, or spiritually. Atlantis fell when inner balance was lost before outer destruction occurred. This lesson challenges modern society to measure success not only by wealth or technology, but by cohesion, meaning, and care. In the end, Atlantis stands as a question rather than an answer. It asks whether humanity can remember what...
The mystery of Atlantis reaches its ultimate conclusion not by revealing a location or uncovering ruins, but by completing its transformation from legend into timeless understanding. After centuries of debate, imagination, and reinterpretation, Atlantis no longer demands to be found beneath the sea. Instead, it asks to be recognized within humanity itself. The final truth of Atlantis is not geographical, but philosophical, psychological, and civilizational. Atlantis survives because it adapts. Each era reshapes the legend according to its fears and hopes. In ancient times, it was a moral lesson about divine balance. In the medieval period, it became a symbol of forbidden knowledge. In the modern age, it transformed into a warning about technological arrogance and environmental collapse. In every form, Atlantis reflects the anxieties of its time. This adaptability is why Atlantis never disappears. It evolves as humanity evolves. The final lesson of Atlantis is that civilizations do not collapse suddenly. They erode quietly. Long before the ocean rose, Atlantis had already fallen internally. Pride replaced humility, expansion replaced restraint, and power replaced wisdom. This pattern repeats throughout history. Empires rarely fall because of a single disaster. They fall because they ignore small warnings, normalize imbalance, and mistake endurance for invincibility. Modern civilization stands at a similar threshold. Technological advancement has created unprecedented comfort and capability, but also unprecedented risk. Climate instability, resource depletion, social fragmentation, and ethical uncertainty echo the same imbalance described in the Atlantean myth. Atlantis does not claim that collapse is inevitable, but it insists that ignoring imbalance makes collapse likely. Atlantis also teaches that progress without purpose is dangerous. The Atlanteans mastered engineering and governance, yet lost sight of why these systems existed. Modern societies face the same challenge. Systems grow complex, but meaning becomes unclear. People serve structures rather than structures serving people. Atlantis reminds humanity that systems must remain grounded in human values, where they become instruments of collapse. Another crucial conclusion of Atlantis is the illusion of permanence. Cities, institutions, and technologies often feel eternal while they exist. Atlantis shatters this illusion. It shows that even the greatest achievements can vanish without leaving certainty behind. This realization is not meant to inspire fear, but responsibility. Knowing that nothing is permanent encourages care, preservation, and humility. Atlantis also confronts humanity with the cost of disconnection from nature. The Atlanteans believed they had mastered the natural world, yet modern societies hold the same belief. Yet nature remains indifferent to ambition. When balance is broken, consequences follow. Atlantis reframes nature not as an enemy or resource, but as a system humanity must remain within. Survival depends on cooperation, not domination. The final meaning of Atlantis lies in memory. The story survived because someone remembered, retold, and reflected. Memory becomes resistance against disappearance. In a world overwhelmed by information, true memory becomes fragile. Atlantis urges humanity to remember wisely, not endlessly. What is remembered shapes what is protected. Atlantis also reveals that collapse is not only physical. Civilizations can continue functioning while losing meaning, empathy, and cohesion. Atlantis fell spiritually before it fell materially. This insight challenges modern societies to measure health beyond economic growth or technological reach. A civilization without shared meaning is already unstable. In its final form, Atlantis becomes a mirror rather than a map. It does not point to coordinates, but to patterns. It asks whether humanity recognizes repeating mistakes. It asks whether wisdom can grow alongside power. It asks whether restraint can coexist with ambition. These questions define the future more than any discovery of ruins ever could. The legend also offers hope. Atlantis fell, but humanity learned from the story. Awareness itself is survival. Myths exist to prevent repetition, not to glorify loss. Atlantis suggests that collapse is not destiny when lessons are remembered. Conscious choice can interrupt destructive patterns. Atlantis further teaches that greatness must be shared to survive. When wealth and power concentrate, imbalance accelerates. The Atlanteans forgot collective responsibility. Modern inequality echoes this danger. Atlantis warns that civilizations fracture when benefits are isolated and burdens are ignored. The ocean swallowing Atlantis symbolizes time itself. Time erases what is not maintained. Cultures, languages, and values disappear quietly when neglected. Atlantis reminds humanity that preservation is active, not passive. Survival requires effort, reflection, and renewal. As the final part unfolds, Atlantis no longer feels distant, it feels intimate. Its rise and fall resemble personal lives, communities, and nations. Atlantis becomes a universal story of choice. Every generation stands at the same crossroads between wisdom and excess. The ultimate conclusion of Atlantis is not tragedy, but responsibility. Humanity is not condemned to repeat the past, but challenged to understand it. Atlantis remains unfinished because its outcome depends on future choices. It is a warning written in myth, not stone. Atlantis also teaches the importance of humility before the unknown. Despite centuries of research, certainty remains elusive. This uncertainty is not failure, it is a reminder that knowledge has limits. Respecting those limits is itself wisdom. In the end, Atlantis does not ask to be believed, it asks to be remembered correctly, not as a lost paradise, but as a lesson about balance, not as a mystery to solve, but as a pattern to recognize. The mystery of Atlantis concludes where it began, with humanity itself. As long as societies rise, expand, and test limits, Atlantis will remain relevant. It exists wherever ambition exceeds wisdom and disappears wherever balance is restored. Part 10 closes the story, not with an ending, but with an invitation to reflect, to choose, and to remember. Atlantis is not waiting under the ocean, it is waiting in decisions, values, and priorities. If humanity learns, Atlantis remains a story. If humanity forgets, Atlantis becomes a prophecy. And that is the final mystery of Atlantis.
Atlantis no longer exists as a beginning or an ending, but as a continuous presence woven into human thought, imagination, and destiny. After the conclusion of the legend, what remains is not silence, but resonance. Atlantis echoes through time as a reminder that civilization is not a fixed achievement, but a fragile process that must be renewed with every generation. The story survives because humanity continues to face the same choices that once defined Atlantis. It becomes a symbol of humanity's eternal experiment with power. Every civilization tests how far it can go before restraint becomes necessary. Atlantis crossed that invisible line where confidence turned into arrogance and growth turned into excess. Modern societies, armed with unprecedented technology, now stand closer to that line than ever before. The legend does not accuse, it observes. It simply shows what happens when limits are ignored. In this stage of reflection, Atlantis represents the cost of speed. The Atlanteans advanced rapidly, mastering architecture, governance, and science, but they outpaced their ethical development. Modern societies mirror this imbalance. Innovation accelerates faster than wisdom. Systems evolve faster than values. Atlantis reminds humanity that speed without direction leads not forward, but downward. Atlantis also transforms into a lesson about attention. The Atlanteans stopped paying attention to subtle warnings. Small imbalances were dismissed as temporary. Minor injustices were normalized. Environmental shifts were underestimated. Collapse did not arrive suddenly, it accumulated quietly. This pattern repeats endlessly in human history. The greatest danger is not catastrophe, but complacency. The myth also explores humanity's relationship with memory and denial. Atlantis was remembered just enough to survive as a warning, but not enough to prevent repetition. Modern humanity often remembers disasters without absorbing their lessons. Atlantis challenges this shallow remembrance. It suggests that memory must change behavior to be meaningful. In Part 11,
Atlantis becomes a psychological landscape. It exists in the human mind as fear of loss and desire for perfection. The idea of a lost golden age comforts people who feel dissatisfied with the present. Yet this longing can become dangerous if it replaces responsibility. Atlantis warns that nostalgia without accountability leads to stagnation. Atlantis also questions humanity's definition of success. The Atlanteans were successful by every visible measure: wealth, influence, and innovation. Yet their success masked internal decay. Modern societies often repeat this mistake, equating growth with health. Atlantis reframes success as balance, sustainability, and shared meaning rather than accumulation. The ocean that swallowed Atlantis now symbolizes time, uncertainty, and consequence. It hides mistakes but does not erase them. The ocean waits patiently. Humanity often forgets that consequences do not disappear simply because they are delayed. Atlantis teaches that time does not forgive imbalance, it reveals it. Another layer of Atlantis in this part is its role as a moral compass without commandments. Unlike laws or doctrines, Atlantis offers no rules, it offers patterns. This makes it powerful. Patterns can be recognized across cultures, eras, and systems. Atlantis becomes universal because it does not belong to any one belief system. Atlantis also reflects the danger of separating intelligence from empathy. The Atlanteans became brilliant engineers but lost emotional connection to one another. Modern societies risk the same separation as automation and abstraction increase. Atlantis warns that civilizations collapse when people become numbers and systems replace relationships. In this reflection, Atlantis becomes less about destruction and more about prevention. The story exists so that collapse does not have to be repeated. Awareness is the hidden gift of the myth. Atlantis survives not to frighten humanity, but to awaken it. Atlantis also explores the illusion of superiority. The Atlanteans believed they were chosen, exceptional, and immune. History shows that every collapsing civilization once believed the same. Modern societies are not exempt. Atlantis humbles by reminding humanity that no achievement guarantees survival. Part 11 also emphasizes that collapse is not always visible. Civilizations can appear stable while eroding internally. Trust dissolves, meaning fades, and cohesion weakens long before physical destruction occurs. Atlantis fell inward before it fell outward. This insight is crucial for understanding modern instability. Atlantis further challenges humanity's relationship with nature. The Atlanteans treated nature as something to be controlled. Modern societies often repeat this mindset. Atlantis reframes nature as a partner rather than an obstacle. Survival depends on cooperation, not conquest. As the reflection deepens, Atlantis becomes a test of wisdom. Wisdom is not knowledge alone, but the ability to recognize limits and act accordingly. Atlantis failed this test. The future of humanity depends on whether it can pass it. Atlantis also reveals that myths are not lies, but compressed truths. They carry meaning across time by sacrificing detail for insight. Atlantis may not be historically provable, but it is psychologically accurate. It describes how civilizations behave under abundance and power. In Part 11, Atlantis becomes a living warning embedded in culture, art, literature, and philosophy. Every dystopian future echoes Atlantis. Every cautionary tale about collapse carries its shadow. Atlantis has become a template for understanding failure. Yet Atlantis also carries hope. The fact that humanity continues to tell the story suggests a desire to avoid repeating it. Awareness is resistance. Reflection is survival. Atlantis exists because humanity still cares. The legend ultimately asks whether humanity can evolve faster ethically than technologically. This question defines the future more than any invention.
Atlantis suggests that survival depends not on intelligence, but on wisdom. Atlantis also teaches that balance is dynamic, not static. It must be maintained continuously. The Atlanteans believed balance was permanent once achieved. This belief doomed them. Modern society must learn that balance requires constant effort. As the Part 11 draws toward its quiet conclusion, Atlantis no longer feels like a lost city. It feels like a choice repeated endlessly. Every generation either remembers or forgets. Every society either listens or ignores. Atlantis does not judge. It reflects. It waits. The mystery of Atlantis continues, not because it is unsolved, but because humanity is unfinished. As long as civilizations rise, Atlantis will stand in their shadow, asking the same silent question: will wisdom arrive before collapse? And that question remains unanswered, not in myth, but in reality.
Atlantis moves fully beyond the boundaries of ancient myth and enters the realm of future civilization. At this stage, Atlantis is no longer only a memory of what was lost, but a projection of what could be lost again. The legend becomes a lens through which humanity can examine its possible futures. Atlantis stands not behind us, but ahead of us, waiting in the choices yet to be made. Future civilizations, like Atlantis, will likely be defined by extraordinary technological capability. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, space exploration, and planetary-scale infrastructure echo the advanced engineering once attributed to Atlantis. These developments promise comfort, efficiency, and expansion, yet they also carry the same fundamental risk: power growing faster than wisdom. Atlantis warns that technological brilliance alone cannot guarantee survival. Atlantis teaches that future collapse will not come from ignorance, but from misused knowledge. The Atlanteans were not primitive, they were advanced. Their failure came from ethical imbalance, not technical limitation. In the same way, future societies may possess solutions to their problems, but lack the will or unity to apply them wisely. Atlantis becomes a reminder that knowing is not the same as choosing. In imagining future civilizations, Atlantis highlights the danger of over-optimization. Systems designed for maximum efficiency often sacrifice resilience. The Atlanteans built a perfectly ordered society, yet that order left little room for adaptation. Modern and future systems, driven by algorithms and automation, risk the same fragility. When systems become too optimized, a single disruption can cause widespread collapse. Atlantis also offers insight into the future relationship between humanity and nature. As civilizations expand beyond Earth or reshape ecosystems, the illusion of separation from nature grows stronger. Atlantis contradicts this illusion. It shows that no civilization, no matter how advanced, can exist outside natural systems. Future survival depends on integration, not escape. A lesson Atlantis offers future civilizations is the importance of cultural depth. The Atlanteans lost their cultural and spiritual grounding as material success increased. Future societies may face a similar hollowing if meaning is replaced by consumption and identity by productivity. Atlantis warns that a civilization without shared purpose becomes unstable, regardless of its technological achievements. Atlantis also challenges future societies to reconsider governance. Centralized power, when disconnected from accountability, accelerates imbalance. The Atlantean rulers became distant from the people they governed. Future civilizations, especially those spanning planets or digital realms, risk repeating this mistake. Atlantis emphasizes that governance must evolve alongside scale, or collapse becomes inevitable. As humanity looks toward the future, Atlantis becomes a test of foresight. Can future societies recognize early warning signs before damage becomes irreversible? The Atlanteans ignored subtle signals because collapse seemed impossible. Future civilizations may dismiss warnings about climate thresholds, social fragmentation, or ethical misuse of technology for the same reason. Atlantis teaches that denial is more dangerous than ignorance. Atlantis also reframes the concept of progress for future generations. Progress is often measured by speed, growth, and expansion. Atlantis proposes a different metric: sustainability, adaptability, and balance. A civilization that expands endlessly without reflection is not advancing, but accelerating toward collapse. In future contexts, Atlantis becomes a story about scale. As civilizations grow larger and more complex, individual responsibility feels smaller. The Atlanteans lost their sense of personal accountability within a vast system. Future societies, especially digital ones, may face the same erosion of responsibility. Atlantis reminds humanity that systems do not replace ethics, they amplify them. Atlantis also serves as a warning about inequality in future civilizations. Concentrated wealth and power create instability long before collapse becomes visible. The Atlanteans allowed inequality to widen, weakening social cohesion. Future societies that fail to address inequality risk repeating this fragmentation. Atlantis teaches that unity is not optional, it is structural. In the future, Atlantis may no longer be told as a myth, but as a model. Scholars, planners, and philosophers may study Atlantis as a symbolic case study of collapse dynamics. Its value lies not in historical accuracy, but in pattern recognition. Atlantis becomes a framework for understanding how civilizations fail. Atlantis also raises questions about humanity's role beyond Earth. If humans establish civilizations on other planets, will they carry the same patterns of imbalance with them? Atlantis suggests that location does not change behavior. Without internal transformation, collapse follows humanity wherever it goes. As future civilizations interact with artificial intelligence, Atlantis gains new relevance. AI systems may optimize decisions beyond human comprehension. Without ethical oversight, such systems could amplify imbalance. Atlantis reminds future societies that delegation of power without responsibility leads to loss of control. Atlantis also emphasizes the importance of humility in the face of uncertainty. Future civilizations may believe they have solved the problem of collapse through prediction and control. Atlantis contradicts this confidence. It shows that uncertainty cannot be eliminated, only respected. In Part 12, Atlantis becomes a bridge between warning and hope. The future is not predetermined. Awareness of patterns allows intervention. Atlantis exists so future civilizations can choose differently. Atlantis also teaches that survival requires more than innovation. It requires reflection. Reflection slows progress just enough to prevent self-destruction. The Atlanteans failed to pause. Future societies must learn to stop, assess, and adjust. As the narrative deepens, Atlantis transforms into a universal future myth. It belongs not to the past, but to every civilization that will ever exist. It asks the same question repeatedly: will wisdom arrive before collapse? Atlantis also reveals that the greatest threat to future civilizations may not be external. It may come from internal fragmentation, loss of meaning, and ethical confusion. Atlantis fell because it lost coherence. Future survival depends on maintaining shared values. In the final movement of Part 12, Atlantis stands as a silent advisor to the future. It does not command or predict. It observes. It waits for humanity to listen. The mystery of Atlantis continues because the future remains unwritten.
Atlantis is not a prophecy carved in stone, but a possibility written in choice. Every future civilization will either confirm the myth or transcend it. And so Atlantis moves forward with humanity, not as a shadow of the past, but as a guidepost for what must never be forgotten.
Atlantis stands face to face with the modern world, no longer as a distant myth, but as a striking parallel to contemporary global crises. The legend now feels unsettlingly familiar. The patterns that once defined Atlantis, unchecked growth, environmental imbalance, concentration of power, and moral erosion are visible across today's world. Atlantis becomes less a story of the past and more a reflection of the present. Modern civilization, like Atlantis, exists at a peak of achievement. Never before has humanity possessed such technological reach, scientific knowledge, and global connectivity. Yet alongside this progress exists deep instability. Climate change, political polarization, economic inequality, cultural fragmentation, and technological anxiety echo the same internal fractures that preceded Atlantis's fall. The myth no longer whispers, it speaks loudly. Atlantis teaches that global crises rarely emerge suddenly. They accumulate slowly through ignored warnings and postponed responsibility. Climate change, for example, mirrors Atlantis's environmental imbalance. The Atlanteans altered their natural surroundings in pursuit of expansion, believing their mastery was permanent. Modern society, through industrialization and consumption, has similarly reshaped the planet while underestimating long-term consequences. Atlantis reminds us that nature does not negotiate with ambition. The legend also parallels modern economic inequality. Atlantis concentrated wealth and power among elites, weakening social cohesion. Today's global economy reflects a similar divide. A small percentage controls vast resources, while billions face insecurity. Atlantis warns that inequality is not merely a moral issue, but a structural threat. Societies fracture when shared prosperity disappears. Political fragmentation further strengthens the Atlantis parallel. The Atlantean leadership became disconnected from the people, prioritizing dominance over responsibility. Modern political systems often suffer from the same detachment. Decision-makers operate within insulated structures, far removed from everyday consequences. Atlantis demonstrates that when trust erodes between rulers and the ruled, collapse accelerates. Technology plays a central role in this modern comparison. Atlantis was advanced for its time, yet its technological confidence blinded it to ethical limits. Today's digital world, artificial intelligence, surveillance systems, automation, and algorithmic governance offers immense power, but raises profound ethical questions. Atlantis warns that technology without moral guidance magnifies human flaws rather than correcting them. Modern global crises also reflect Atlantis's loss of shared meaning. As the Atlanteans pursued material success, cultural and spiritual cohesion weakened. Today's world often prioritizes productivity, efficiency, and consumption over purpose and connection. This erosion of meaning fuels anxiety, alienation, and social unrest. Atlantis suggests that civilizations collapse not only from external pressure, but from internal emptiness. Environmental collapse remains one of the most direct parallels. Rising seas, extreme weather, and ecosystem destruction evoke the ocean swallowing Atlantis. While the myth describes sudden destruction, the modern version unfolds gradually, yet the end result may be similar if balance is not restored. Atlantis reminds humanity that nature's environmental thresholds, once crossed, cannot always be reversed. Atlantis also mirrors modern denial. The Atlanteans ignored early warnings because acknowledging them threatened comfort and power.
Modern society often reacts similarly to scientific and social warnings. Short-term convenience outweighs long-term survival. Atlantis shows that denial does not prevent collapse, it ensures it. Another striking parallel lies in globalization. Atlantis was a powerful, interconnected empire. Modern civilization is globally interdependent. While this connectivity creates opportunity, it also spreads risk. A failure in one region affects the entire system. Atlantis teaches that shared responsibility requires shared opportunity, not isolated ambition. The myth also highlights the danger of speed. Modern life accelerates constantly. News cycles, markets, innovation, communication, reflection becomes rare. Atlantis warns that speed without reflection leads to irreversible mistakes. Civilizations need pauses to correct course. Without them, collapse becomes momentum-driven. Atlantis further reflects modern humanity's relationship with truth. As Atlantis declined, truth became inconvenient. Power replaced honesty. Today's misinformation, propaganda, and manipulated narratives echo this erosion. When truth loses value, societies lose direction. Atlantis reminds us that truth is not optional for survival. Social fragmentation is another shared pattern. Atlantis lost unity as inequality and ambition divided its people. Modern societies face increasing polarization, political, cultural, ideological. Atlantis teaches that division weakens collective resilience. A divided civilization cannot respond effectively to crisis. In Part 13, Atlantis also becomes a warning about misplaced faith in systems. The Atlanteans trusted their structures to protect them. Modern humanity often places similar faith in markets, institutions, and technologies. Atlantis reveals that systems are only as strong as the values guiding them. When values decay, systems fail. The modern global crisis also mirrors Atlantis's moral exhaustion. Constant competition, consumption, and comparison drain collective empathy. Atlantis fell when compassion gave way to dominance. Modern societies risk the same fate when empathy is treated as weakness. Atlantis also challenges modern humanity's belief in exceptionalism. Many societies believe collapse happens elsewhere, to others. Atlantis contradicts this belief. It shows that greatness does not grant immunity. In fact, it often increases vulnerability. Yet Atlantis is not only a warning, it is an opportunity. Awareness of these parallels allows intervention. Modern humanity still has time to choose differently. The myth exists to interrupt repetition. Atlantis suggests that solutions to global crises must be holistic. Technological fixes alone are insufficient. Ethical renewal, cultural cohesion, environmental respect, and shared responsibility must evolve together. Atlantis fell because it addressed symptoms, not causes. In this part, Atlantis becomes a global mirror. Every nation sees a reflection of itself. The myth refuses to assign blame to one culture or era. It reveals universal patterns of human behavior under power and abundance. Atlantis also reminds humanity that collapse is not always total. It can be partial, uneven, and prolonged. Civilizations can decline quietly while appearing stable. This subtlety makes modern collapse harder to recognize. Atlantis sharpens perception. As Part 13 unfolds, Atlantis stands at the center of modern global crisis discourse. It becomes a symbolic framework for understanding why warnings are ignored, why imbalance persists, and why correction feels difficult. The legend ultimately asks whether modern humanity will repeat the Atlantean path or transform it. The answer remains open. Atlantis does not predict failure. It highlights possibility. Atlantis survives because it addresses what statistics cannot: meaning, responsibility, and choice.
It transforms abstract crises into a human story. In the end, Atlantis is no longer beneath the ocean. It is visible in melting ice caps, fractured societies, restless technologies, and anxious minds. The myth has surfaced into reality. Part 13 leaves humanity at a crossroads. One path continues imbalance. The other requires humility, restraint, and collective wisdom. Atlantis waits silently, not as a judge, but as a reminder.
Atlantis shifts from warning to possibility. After examining collapse, imbalance, and modern global crises, this part asks a different question. Can humanity choose a different path? Atlantis, once a symbol of inevitable downfall, now becomes a guide for renewal. The legend suggests that collapse is not destiny, but consequence, and what is caused by choices can also be prevented by choices. Atlantis teaches that the first step toward survival is recognition. The Atlanteans failed because they did not recognize imbalance while it was still reversible. Modern humanity, however, possesses awareness. Scientific knowledge, historical insight, and global communication provide unprecedented understanding of risk. This awareness is humanity's greatest advantage. Atlantis implies that knowing is the doorway to change. Hope in the Atlantean lesson does not come from technology alone, but from restraint. The Atlanteans believed advancement meant constant expansion. Modern civilization often shares this belief. Atlantis challenges this idea by redefining progress as balance rather than growth. A civilization that learns when to slow down becomes resilient rather than fragile. Renewal begins with restoring the relationship between humanity and nature. Atlantis fell when it treated nature as an obstacle rather than a partner. Modern societies now face the same choice. Sustainable practices, ecological restoration, and respect for natural limits are not sacrifices, but survival strategies. Atlantis shows that harmony with nature is not weakness, but strength. Another path away from collapse lies in rebuilding shared meaning. Atlantis lost its moral and cultural cohesion before it lost its land. Modern societies often struggle with fragmentation, loneliness, and loss of purpose. Renewal requires more than economic reform. It requires narratives that reconnect people to one another. Atlantis reminds humanity that civilizations survive through shared values, not shared markets alone. Atlantis also offers hope through decentralization of power. Concentrated authority accelerated Atlantean collapse. Modern renewal depends on accountability, transparency, and participation. When people feel ownership of their future, societies become adaptable. Atlantis teaches that resilience grows from inclusion. Education plays a crucial role in avoiding the Atlantean fate. The Atlanteans passed down skills but neglected wisdom. Modern education must go beyond technical training to include ethics, history, empathy, and critical thinking. Atlantis suggests that a wise civilization educates character as carefully as competence. Another lesson of hope lies in humility. Atlantis collapsed under the weight of its own certainty. Modern humanity must learn to live with uncertainty rather than deny it. Humility allows correction. It keeps systems flexible. Atlantis shows that civilizations survive not by being right, but by being adaptable. Technology, often blamed for modern crisis, can also become a tool for renewal if guided by wisdom. Atlantis warns against uncontrolled power, not against innovation itself. Ethical technology, designed to enhance human well-being rather than replace it, can strengthen resilience. The difference lies in intention. Atlantis also teaches that small corrections matter. Collapse is often imagined as dramatic, but prevention is subtle. Everyday choices, energy use, consumption habits, political engagement, empathy shape long-term outcomes. Atlantis suggests that survival is built quietly, not heroically. Hope also emerges from global cooperation. Atlantis was isolated in its superiority. Modern humanity is interconnected. This interconnectedness can spread collapse, but it can also spread solutions. Atlantis implies that cooperation, not competition, is the foundation of long-term survival. Renewal requires restoring trust. Atlantis fell when trust between rulers, people, and nature eroded. Modern societies suffer from similar distrust. Rebuilding trust demands honesty, accountability, and shared responsibility. Atlantis shows that trust is not optional, it is structural. Atlantis further suggests that civilizations must redefine success. Success measured only by wealth and power leads to imbalance. A renewed civilization measures success by well-being, stability, creativity, and sustainability. Atlantis offers this redefinition as a path forward. Another hopeful lesson lies in memory. Atlantis survived as a story because someone remembered. Modern humanity must choose what to remember and what to repeat. Memory becomes a tool of prevention when it informs action. Forgetting, as Atlantis shows, is the true danger. Atlantis also reveals that renewal is continuous, not final. Balance must be maintained daily. The Atlanteans believed they had achieved perfection. This belief ended them. Modern humanity must accept that no system is complete. Adaptation is survival. In this part, Atlantis transforms from a fallen city into a living teacher. It does not condemn humanity, it challenges it. The myth exists not to predict collapse, but to prevent it. Hope in Atlantis is quiet but powerful. It lies in choice, reflection, and restraint. It lies in the ability to learn without repeating pain. Atlantis suggests that humanity's greatest strength is not intelligence, but awareness. As Part 14 unfolds, Atlantis no longer feels like a shadow, it feels like a guidepost. The same patterns that caused collapse can be reversed through conscious effort. Atlantis also teaches that renewal begins internally. Societal change follows individual values. Compassion, responsibility, and humility at the personal level ripple outward. Atlantis fell because these qualities eroded collectively. The legend ultimately affirms that collapse is not written into human nature. What is written is choice. Every generation inherits the same test. Atlantis failed it. Humanity does not have to. In the closing movement of Part 14, Atlantis stands between warning and hope. It asks whether humanity will continue repeating patterns or finally transform them. The answer is not hidden beneath the ocean. It is visible in daily decisions. Atlantis remains unfinished because humanity is still choosing. Renewal is possible. Collapse is avoidable. Balance is achievable. The mystery of Atlantis now becomes a responsibility rather than a fear. It reminds humanity that survival is not accidental, it is intentional. And with that realization, Atlantis offers its greatest gift, the chance to choose differently.
The mystery of Atlantis reaches its final form not as a story that ends, but as a responsibility that remains. After tracing Atlantis from ancient myth to modern crisis and future possibility, one truth becomes clear. Atlantis is not a lost civilization waiting to be discovered, but a lesson waiting to be lived. Its legacy does not rest beneath the ocean, but within the decisions humanity makes every day. Atlantis represents the moment when a civilization stands at its highest point and believes the future is guaranteed. That belief is the most dangerous illusion any society can hold. The Atlanteans did not fall because they lacked knowledge or strength. They fell because they assumed their success was permanent.
Modern humanity, standing at an unprecedented peak of power, faces the same temptation. Atlantis exists to challenge that assumption. The final legacy of Atlantis is choice. Every civilization inherits the same crossroads: restraint or excess, wisdom or arrogance, balance or domination. Atlantis chose excess. The myth survives so that humanity might choose differently. This is not a moral command, but an observation drawn from patterns repeated across history. Atlantis also leaves behind a warning about forgetting why civilizations exist. The Atlanteans built systems to serve life, but eventually demanded life serve systems. Modern societies often repeat this inversion. Economies, technologies, and institutions grow powerful, while human well-being becomes secondary. Atlantis reminds us that when systems outgrow purpose, collapse follows quietly. In its final meaning, Atlantis teaches that collapse begins internally. Long before the ocean rose, trust eroded, empathy weakened, and responsibility dissolved. External disaster merely completed what internal decay had already begun. Modern humanity often fears sudden catastrophe, yet Atlantis suggests the greater danger lies in slow moral erosion. Atlantis also clarifies that survival is not guaranteed by intelligence. The Atlanteans were brilliant, yet unwise. Modern humanity is highly intelligent, yet often struggles with wisdom. Knowledge expands faster than ethics. Power grows faster than responsibility. Atlantis warns that intelligence without wisdom accelerates destruction. The myth also leaves a lesson about humility. Atlantis collapsed under the weight of certainty. It believed it had mastered nature, society, and fate. Modern humanity risks the same belief through technology and prediction. Atlantis teaches that humility is not weakness, but awareness of limits. Civilizations survive by respecting what they cannot fully control. Atlantis's legacy extends to humanity's relationship with nature. The Atlanteans treated the natural world as a resource to dominate. Modern civilization often does the same. Atlantis reframes nature as a system humanity belongs to, not rules over. Survival depends on cooperation with natural limits, not conquest. The final part also reveals that memory is humanity's greatest defense against repetition. Atlantis survived as a story because someone remembered. Memory transforms loss into guidance. Forgetting transforms warning into destiny. Atlantis asks humanity not merely to remember the myth, but to remember its meaning. Atlantis also challenges the modern obsession with speed. Faster growth, faster innovation, faster consumption are often equated with success. Atlantis contradicts this belief. It shows that unchecked acceleration leads to fragility. Slowing down, reflecting, and correcting course are acts of strength, not failure. Another lasting legacy of Atlantis is the importance of shared responsibility. The Atlanteans allowed inequality and concentration of power to grow. This weakened cohesion and resilience. Modern societies face similar risks. Atlantis teaches that civilizations survive when benefits and burdens are shared, not isolated. Atlantis also reframes hope. Hope is not denial of danger. It is the belief that awareness can change outcomes. Atlantis offers hope not because collapse never happens, but because it does not have to repeat. The myth exists as proof that learning is possible. In its final reflection, Atlantis becomes a mirror held up to humanity. It does not accuse or condemn, it simply reflects patterns. What humanity sees in that reflection determines the future. Atlantis remains silent because the answer does not belong to the past. Atlantis also teaches that balance is not a destination, but a practice. The Atlanteans believed balance had been achieved permanently. This belief doomed them. Modern humanity must accept that balance requires constant attention. There is no final solution, only ongoing responsibility.
The legend further reminds humanity that collapse is rarely dramatic at first. It begins with small compromises, ignored warnings, and rationalized excess. Atlantis fell not in a single moment, but through many choices that felt harmless at the time. This insight gives humanity power, because small choices can also prevent collapse. Atlantis's final gift is perspective. It places modern crises within a long human story. It shows that humanity has faced similar moments before. This perspective does not minimize danger, but it reduces despair. If patterns are understood, they can be changed.
The mystery of Atlantis expands beyond humanity itself and enters a broader perspective of time, existence, and impermanence. At this stage, Atlantis is no longer only a lesson for human civilization, but a symbol of how all intelligent societies may rise, flourish, and fade within the vast rhythm of the universe. The story becomes cosmic in scale, reminding us that civilizations are brief events in an ancient and indifferent cosmos. Atlantis now represents the fragility of intelligence within time. The universe has existed for billions of years, while even the longest human civilizations last only a few thousand. Atlantis compresses this truth into a single image, a great society erased almost instantly, leaving behind uncertainty and myth. From this perspective, Atlantis is not unique. It is an example of how quickly complexity can disappear. This cosmic view challenges humanity's sense of importance. The Atlanteans believed their civilization was central and enduring. Modern humanity often holds a similar belief, assuming progress moves endlessly forward. Atlantis disrupts this assumption. It shows that intelligence does not guarantee permanence. Survival is conditional, not promised. From this distance, Atlantis becomes a meditation on entropy. All systems tend toward disorder unless energy is continuously invested in balance. The Atlanteans stopped investing in ethical and ecological balance while expanding material complexity. The result was collapse. This principle applies not only to civilizations, but to ecosystems, stars, and even galaxies. Atlantis becomes a human-scale example of a universal law. Atlantis also raises questions about other civilizations beyond Earth. If intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe, have they faced their own Atlantean moments? Did they rise rapidly, master their environment, and then vanish due to imbalance? Atlantis suggests that collapse may be a common phase in the evolution of intelligence, not an exception. This perspective reframes the fear of collapse. Collapse is no longer merely a failure, but part of a larger cycle. Yet this does not remove responsibility. Awareness of cycles allows interruption. Atlantis implies that intelligence gains meaning when it learns to break destructive patterns rather than repeat them. Atlantis also symbolizes the silence that follows extinction. When a civilization disappears, the universe does not mourn. Stars continue to burn. Oceans continue to move. This silence is humbling. It reminds humanity that meaning exists only while someone is there to create it. Atlantis urges humanity to protect meaning itself. In this part, Atlantis becomes a reflection on legacy. What remains after a civilization ends? Physical structures erode, technologies decay. Only influence, memory, and patterns endure. Atlantis survived not as stone, but as story. This suggests that the most durable legacy of any civilization is not its buildings, but its lessons. Atlantis also challenges humanity's obsession with leaving marks on the universe. Monuments, megastructures, and expansion into space are often imagined as paths to immortality. Atlantis contradicts this dream. It shows that endurance does not come from scale, but from balance. A small, wise civilization may outlast a vast, reckless one.
From a cosmic view, Atlantis becomes a warning about speed in evolutionary terms. Rapid advancement increases vulnerability. The Atlanteans evolved faster technologically than ethically. Humanity may be doing the same. Atlantis suggests that intelligence must evolve inward as fast as it evolves outward. Atlantis also invites reflection on consciousness itself. A civilization is a temporary organization of awareness. When it collapses, that organized awareness dissolves. Atlantis represents a moment when collective consciousness failed to sustain itself. This raises a deeper question. Can consciousness learn to preserve itself across time? In Part 16, Atlantis also becomes a story about humility before the unknown. The universe contains forces far beyond human control. Atlantis fell when it believed control was complete. Modern humanity risks repeating this belief through prediction, simulation, and automation. Atlantis reminds humanity that uncertainty cannot be eliminated, only respected. Atlantis further suggests that meaning is fragile but powerful. The universe may be indifferent, but meaning arises wherever consciousness exists. Atlantis fell when meaning was replaced by dominance. Survival, therefore, depends not on conquering the universe, but on sustaining meaning within it. This part also reframes hope. Hope is not immortality. Hope is continuity of wisdom. Even if civilizations end, their lessons can travel forward through memory and influence. Atlantis survived because its story crossed time. Humanity's task is to ensure that its wisdom travels farther than its ruins. Atlantis also reflects on the loneliness of intelligence. In a vast universe, intelligent civilizations may be rare and isolated. This rarity makes survival even more precious. Atlantis suggests that intelligence carries responsibility not only to itself, but to the universe that produced it. From this perspective, collapse becomes tragic not because structures fall, but because awareness disappears. Atlantis represents lost perspectives, lost questions, lost creativity. This loss gives urgency to preservation, not of power, but of consciousness. As Part 16 unfolds, Atlantis dissolves further into abstraction. It is no longer a city, a warning, or even a mirror. It becomes a principle. Intelligence must learn balance or vanish. This principle applies everywhere intelligence arises. Atlantis also teaches that humility may be the rarest survival trait. Strength, intelligence, and innovation are common among rising civilizations. Humility is rare. Atlantis fell because humility eroded. Humanity's future may depend on cultivating what is rare rather than what is powerful. In the closing movement of Part 16, Atlantis is no longer beneath the ocean or within history. It floats within time itself, a quiet reminder that existence is temporary and awareness is precious. The mystery of Atlantis now belongs not only to humanity, but to the universe. It asks whether intelligence can become wise enough to endure its own power. Atlantis does not answer this question. It leaves it open, suspended in time. And in that silence, the future listens.
Atlantis is no longer defined by its fall, but by the question of what comes after understanding. If collapse is a pattern, then learning is the interruption of that pattern. This part imagines a civilization that absorbs the lesson of Atlantis deeply enough to change its trajectory. Atlantis becomes the turning point where intelligence finally evolves into wisdom. A civilization that learns from Atlantis begins by accepting impermanence. Unlike the Atlanteans, who believed stability was permanent, this new civilization understands that change is constant. Instead of resisting change, it designs systems that adapt. Flexibility replaces rigidity. Survival is no longer about strength, but responsiveness. This learning civilization redefines progress. Progress is no longer measured by expansion alone, but by resilience. Growth is balanced with preservation. Innovation is guided by long-term consequence rather than short-term gain. Atlantis failed because it pursued progress without pause. This new civilization builds pauses into its structure. One of the most profound differences lies in how power is handled. Atlantis centralized power until it became disconnected from responsibility. A learning civilization distributes power, ensuring accountability flows in every direction. Authority is temporary, transparent, and revisable. Power is treated as a tool, not an identity. This civilization also learns to integrate ethics directly into technology. In Atlantis, technology advanced independently of moral reflection. In contrast, a post-Atlantis civilization embeds ethical review into every system. Artificial intelligence, energy infrastructure, and governance models are designed with human well-being and ecological balance as core principles, not afterthoughts. Another transformation appears in the relationship with nature. Atlantis attempted domination. The learning civilization seeks partnership. Natural systems are studied not to be conquered, but to be harmonized with. Cities are designed as extensions of ecosystems rather than replacements. Sustainability becomes instinctive rather than enforced. Memory plays a central role in this survival. Unlike Atlantis, which forgot its origins, this civilization institutionalizes memory. History is not treated as decoration, but as guidance. Past failures are studied openly. Myths, like Atlantis, are preserved not as entertainment, but as warnings encoded in story. Education changes fundamentally. Instead of producing specialists disconnected from context, education cultivates holistic thinkers. Ethics, empathy, history, and systems thinking are taught alongside science and engineering. This civilization understands that intelligence without wisdom is incomplete. The learning civilization also redefines success at the individual level. Status is no longer tied solely to accumulation or dominance. Contribution, creativity, and care are valued. This shift prevents the extreme inequality that weakened Atlantis. Social cohesion becomes a survival mechanism. Another lesson learned is the importance of slowness. Atlantis moved too fast to correct itself. This new civilization builds in deliberate slowness for major decisions. Reflection councils, long-term impact simulations, and ethical pauses slow momentum just enough to prevent irreversible mistakes. The civilization that learns also changes its relationship with uncertainty. Atlantis feared uncertainty and tried to eliminate it through control. The learning civilization accepts uncertainty as natural. Policies and systems are designed to be revised rather than defended. Admitting error becomes a strength, not a weakness. In this society, collapse is not denied, but prepared for. Redundancy, decentralization, and adaptability ensure that no single failure destroys the whole. Atlantis collapsed catastrophically because it lacked resilience. This civilization treats resilience as sacred. Atlantis also teaches the danger of cultural emptiness. The learning civilization invests deeply in art, philosophy, and shared rituals. Meaning is cultivated intentionally. This prevents the spiritual erosion that preceded Atlantis's fall. Culture is recognized as infrastructure. From a cosmic perspective, this civilization understands its rarity. Intelligence is precious in an indifferent universe. This awareness creates humility. Expansion into space, if it occurs, is approached cautiously,
with the understanding that carrying imbalance outward only multiplies risk. The learning civilization also transforms competition. Instead of zero-sum dominance, cooperation becomes the primary strategy. Atlantis fell partly because it defined success through superiority. This civilization defined success through continuity. Technology, once a threat, becomes an ally. Because it is guided by wisdom, technology enhances human capacity without replacing human responsibility. Automation frees time for reflection rather than accelerating consumption. Atlantis's greatest lesson is finally absorbed. Collapse begins internally. Therefore, the learning civilization invests in mental health, social trust, and emotional intelligence. These are no longer secondary concerns, but foundations of survival. As Part 17 unfolds, Atlantis fades as a warning and reappears as a teacher. Its failure becomes the seed of transformation. The learning civilization does not erase Atlantis, it honors it by changing. This civilization understands that balance is never final. Continuous correction is its defining trait. When imbalance appears, it is addressed early rather than ignored. This vigilance prevents catastrophe. The learning civilization also accepts mortality. It does not seek immortality through monuments or domination. It seeks continuity through wisdom transfer. Even if it eventually ends, it aims to leave behind understanding rather than ruins. Atlantis once represented the silence after collapse. In contrast, this civilization aims to leave behind a voice, stories, values, and lessons that can travel forward through time. In the closing movement of Part 17, Atlantis stands transformed. It is no longer a symbol of failure, but a reference point humanity used to grow. The myth completes its purpose. The mystery of Atlantis evolves into a new mystery. Can learning outpace collapse? Part 17 suggests that the answer is yes, but only through humility, memory, and conscious choice. Atlantis did not survive, but its lesson did. And through that lesson, a civilization learned how to endure.
The story of Atlantis reaches beyond memory and enters application. This is the stage where knowledge is no longer theoretical, where lessons are no longer symbolic. The civilization that survived by learning now faces its greatest challenge, whether wisdom can endure under pressure. Atlantis was destroyed when its values collapsed before its structures. The final test asks whether a civilization can preserve its values when survival itself is threatened. Every civilization eventually encounters a moment when comfort ends. Resources strain, systems are stressed, and fear returns. In Atlantis, fear triggered domination, secrecy, and denial. In this new era, fear becomes the mirror that reveals whether learning was genuine or superficial. Crisis exposes truth faster than time ever could. The first sign of the final test appears subtly. Environmental signals shift, social tensions rise, and systems that once felt stable begin to wobble. The difference now is awareness. Unlike Atlantis, this civilization recognizes early warnings. But recognition alone is not enough. Action must follow. The greatest temptation during crisis is regression. Old instincts, control, centralization, exclusion resurface. Atlantis failed when it surrendered to these instincts. In Part 18, the civilization stands at the edge of repeating history. The question is not whether collapse is possible, but whether restraint is stronger than fear. Leadership becomes the focal point. In Atlantis, leaders insulated themselves from consequence. In this final test, leadership is exposed. Transparency is demanded. Decisions are debated openly. Power is shared rather than seized. This slows response but preserves trust. Trust becomes the most valuable resource. Technology again stands at the crossroads. Advanced systems could enforce order through surveillance and coercion. Atlantis chose that path. This civilization pauses. It asks not what technology can do, but what it should do. Some tools are deliberately limited, others are redesigned. The refusal to use absolute control becomes an act of courage. The population is tested as well. Learning is no longer abstract. Citizens must choose cooperation over panic, patience over hoarding, empathy over blame. Education proves its worth here. Those trained to think systemically understand that individual survival depends on collective stability. Scarcity reveals character. In Atlantis, scarcity intensified inequality. Here, systems of distribution activate automatically, preventing extreme imbalance. This is not charity, it is design. The civilization understood long ago that inequality accelerates collapse. Cultural memory plays a decisive role. Stories of Atlantis are retold, not as myth, but as precedent. Children and elders alike understand what happens when fear governs decision-making. This shared memory acts as a stabilizer, anchoring behavior during chaos. The final test also challenges identity. Atlantis defined itself by superiority. This civilization defines itself by responsibility. Even when facing external threats, whether environmental, cosmic, or internal, it resists the urge to dehumanize the other. Unity is preserved without erasing difference. Time becomes compressed during crisis. Decisions that once took years must be made in days. Atlantis rushed blindly. This civilization uses pre-designed ethical frameworks to guide rapid choices. Preparation replaces improvisation. One of the most critical moments arrives when sacrifice becomes unavoidable. Atlantis demanded sacrifice from the weak to protect the powerful. In Part 18, sacrifice is shared. Leaders give up privilege first. Systems are scaled back deliberately. Growth is paused to preserve life. The test extends beyond survival into meaning. Atlantis collapsed spiritually before it collapsed physically. This civilization maintains rituals, art, and reflection even during hardship. Meaning prevents despair. Despair is recognized as a silent killer. As pressure intensifies, fractures appear. Not everyone agrees. Dissent arises. Unlike Atlantis, dissent is not crushed, it is integrated. Debate refines solutions. Unity is not forced, it is negotiated. The environment responds as well. Nature, once treated as an enemy, becomes an ally. Ecosystems previously restored now buffer disasters. This partnership proves that earlier restraint was not weakness, but foresight. The final test reaches its peak when a choice must be made between survival through domination or survival through limitation. Atlantis chose domination and lost everything. This civilization chooses limitation. It accepts smaller scale, slower pace, and reduced consumption. In doing so, it survives. Survival does not come without loss. Some systems fail, some comforts vanish, but collapse is avoided. The civilization bends instead of breaking. This flexibility is the ultimate proof of learning. After the crisis passes, there is no celebration of victory, only reflection. The civilization understands that passing one test does not grant immunity. Vigilance must continue. Wisdom is not permanent, it must be renewed. Atlantis is invoked one last time, not as warning, but as contrast. Two civilizations faced collapse. One denied its flaws, the other confronted them. The difference was not intelligence, but humility. Part 18 closes with a quiet realization.
The final test is never a single event. It is a continuous state. Civilization survives not by avoiding crisis, but by responding to it without betraying its core values. Atlantis failed its final test because it believed it was beyond testing. This civilization survives because it knows it never is. The mystery of Atlantis thus completes its transformation from legend to warning to guide. The ruins beneath the sea become foundations within the mind. In the end, the greatest achievement is not survival itself, but the preservation of humanity within survival. That is the true victory Atlantis never achieved. And that is the lesson that endures.